The story begins in West Africa, where something strange is happening at the main biochemistry institute. Loud sounds are heard everywhere. Red lights were flashing in the main building, indicating that an alarm had been sounded throughout the entire facility. Someone broke in and killed all the guards. There were bloody corpses of soldiers with weapons lying everywhere. Those who did this were clearly professionals. One of the laboratory's leading professors was also killed. He had protected a sample of one of the most dangerous viruses on Earth to the last. But now he could no longer do anything, and yet he took from his hands without any problems a small glass cube, inside of which was a test tube with a red substance. This man turned out to be the captain of a special group with special number 228, and now he could report to his superiors about the successful completion of the mission. His name was Hao Tian. He managed to successfully obtain the superblood virus pathogen. Now he should inform all his people and get out of here quickly. However, his telephone conversation was interrupted by a sudden shot from a pistol. The bullet flew straight towards him. He did not expect it at all. In the end, the test tube containing the dangerous pathogen exploded right in his hands, which was very bad because now the hero was guaranteed to become infected. Moreover, one of the fragments left a cut on his cheek. Now the guy had no chance of somehow avoiding infection. It turned out that one of the guards was still conscious. He destroyed the glass cube at the cost of his life. The hero finally took his life, but it was too late. Hao Tian ordered his men not to come within a meter of him, since the pathogen had entered his body anyway and could now infect others. The effect could be felt within a few minutes. The boy felt a strong pain inside, as if the very structure of his DNA had begun to change. At some point, he became so ill that he started bleeding from the mouth. If he didn't find help immediately, the risk of dying became colossal. The events then take us 3 years forward. Here in the city of Fuyang, in the office of one of the corporations, a cleaner was finishing his shift. It was already 9 o'clock in the evening, so there was no one left in the office except him. The guy was calmly finishing his work while humming a song. This man turned out to be Hao Tian. He somehow managed to stay alive after that incident in the laboratory, but apparently he was unable to continue serving. At the same time, the guy was grateful for this. After all, he still had the most valuable thing left. Now he had finished work and could calmly go home. With these thoughts, the hero turned off the light and headed for the exit. But suddenly one small thing caught his attention. The monitor of one of the computers was turned on. Apparently, one of the office workers was too lazy to clean up after themselves. In fact, it was very unprofessional because the company pays good salaries, but people cannot calculate the cost of electricity. Hao Tian walked up to the computer and was about to turn it off, but what he saw on the monitor surprised him even more. The owner of this workplace managed to watch adult films right at work. The hero was very embarrassed when he realized this. As it turned out, there was someone else in the building. The girl caught the hero at the most inopportune moment and asked what he was doing there. Hao Tian replied that he had started working here a few days ago as a cleaner and that he had just finished his shift and was about to leave. The worker's attention was drawn to the fact that the regular cleaner was standing in front of the computer for some reason, since this was in no way part of his duties. After that, the beauty came closer and could see what was happening on the screen. Of course, she thought that Hao Tian was watching it on purpose. Because of this, the girl became very embarrassed and forced him to immediately turn off the computer, which he was allowing himself to do. How shameful was he? The hero tried to justify himself and explained how everything actually happened. The pretty worker simply misunderstood everything. However, she didn't even want to listen to him, but simply took the first thing that came to hand and threw it right at the guy's head. It didn't hurt at all, since a blow from a simple pillow couldn't harm anyone. But the hero was a little confused by the surprise. The beauty continued to call Hao Tian a pervert who, taking advantage of the absence of other people, watched all sorts of nasty things here. She also threatens that tomorrow she will tell the management about everything and the hero will be fired, and he must give her his badge right now. Hao Tian tried once again to explain the whole situation. He didn't want to lose this job at all, since he had no other sources of income. However, the beauty simply kicked in with her heel and continued to stand her ground. She couldn't believe that all of this could be a simple misunderstanding. He was caught red-handed right now, and he continues to lie. Is it really so hard to admit a mistake? How can you even continue to call yourself a man after this? Hao Tian understands that there is no way out and apologizes, but at the same time he was just passing by and does not think that watching such films at work is normal. He acted for the good of the company because electricity is very expensive now. The hero just wanted to turn off the computer. At some point, he became curious about why the worker immediately became so worried when she saw him near the table. If it really was her workplace, that would explain everything. Apparently, the girl herself turned on the adult video and watched while no one was looking. The beauty was very angry when she heard this. How dare this cleaner say such things about her? He will definitely regret it. She even swung her leg at him in an attempt to hit him. He needs to stop talking nonsense right now. However, she doesn't succeed, because Hao Tian easily grabbed her leg. This worker is acting too aggressively. In fact, the guy didn't care whether she had watched such films, but insulting a stranger was actually very low on her part. The girl couldn't believe her eyes. How this cleaner managed to grab her leg with such ease. She has been studying martial arts since childhood. After this, the worker somehow ended up right on the table. The picture turned out to be very obscene. She clearly did not want everything to turn out this way. The hero asks her if she wants to apologize for her words. Does she really like to pin bad deeds on others? The beauty was very scared. It seemed to her that this cleaner was some kind of pervert. Who knows what was on his mind now? At this point, the heroine gets tired of hearing all sorts of insults addressed to her. Now she will find out what happens to those who like to slander the innocent. Hao Tian picked up a marker. It was with this tool that he was going to properly teach the impudent woman a lesson. The guy wrote a few words on her face. The girl was so offended that she even cried a little. He will definitely pay her for this. Just let her wait a little. To avoid this, the hero also took a photo of the employee's face on his phone. If she tried to complain about him, there would be consequences. He can easily post this photo on the company forum, after which the beauty will become very famous. Everyone will talk only about her. At some point, Hao Tian leaves. This girl should think a little about her behavior. After all, she was the first to attack him. However, the beauty only became more angry after this. She hit the chair with her fist with all her strength. This idiot will definitely answer for everything. Her name is Lin Yumu. The girl took this situation as a personal and very deep insult. Now she wants revenge more than anything in the world. The events take place in a small town on the outskirts of a metropolis, which in reality looked like a collection of very poor slums. This area was considered very unfavorable. The houses here were no more than 4 stories high, and crime was rampant on the streets. It was in one of these poor houses that the guy lived. He finally managed to get home from work. Now he can rest a little. The first thing Hao Tian did was open his refrigerator. There was nothing in it except a large amount of beer and some unusual syringes on the side shelf. The hero decides to freshen up a bit and takes out a bottle of alcohol, but as soon as he tried to open it, something bad happened. He suddenly felt a severe pain throughout his body. It was so piercing that he could hardly stand on his feet. Fortunately, after a few seconds, the pain subsided a little. Now he urgently needs to use a special medicine. That's why he had special syringes with an unusual liquid in his refrigerator. Only they could help him. The guy immediately grabs one of these tools and sticks it into his hand. This is definitely a consequence of that incident in Africa a few years ago. There was a virus inside the syringe. This time it turned out to be much stronger than the previous one. Only in this way, the hero manages to avoid death. However, it didn't matter much how powerful the pathogen was. In any case, Hao Tian was obliged to seize the secret place in a few days and get some more material. Things like this can only be found in a secret laboratory at the Institute of Biochemistry, and the last time the guy did this, it turned out pretty funny. However, there was always a danger, because they could update their defense system. Before that, the hero could freely come and go from there without any problems. After this, Hao Tian recalls those events. He can't get that ill-fated day out of his head. It really was a big misfortune. After he ordered his men to approach me, one of his comrades tried to find out what the soldier was going to do next. The boy understood that there was no cure for this virus, and to prevent it from spreading further, he needed to find a secluded place right now. He also asked his comrades to ask their superiors for a leave of absence for him. They just needed to be told that Hao Tian would not be able to return to the team for a while. 3 years have passed since then. The hero had to live in the forest for more than a year. This virus turned him into a real savage. But that was not the worst thing. He was very lucky, because although this virus is incurable, at least it is no longer contagious. The guy could at least live among ordinary people. Now he has to introduce other pathogens into his body to fight the poison. This is the only way to alleviate the suffering. However, Hao Tian understood that this could not continue for long. At some point, his body simply would not be able to withstand it. There was no point in thinking about it now, because everything that could be done had already been done. If the guy died of fatigue now, he wouldn't be able to do anything tomorrow. Now, he needed to sleep. He lay down on the bed and tried to sleep, but as soon as his eyes began to close, he again felt that same sensation, as if every cell in his body was changing its structure. When this happened, Hao Tian suddenly opened his eyes. For some reason, his method didn't work today. The virus in his body hadn't calmed down at all. It was very strange, because the pathogen in that syringe was one of the strongest ever. So why did this pain return so quickly? There was only one way to explain this. Apparently, the disease had already mutated, and now we had to look for other options, otherwise the guy wouldn't last long. He had to use almost all the bacteria he had just to get some sleep. Hao Tian lay on the floor and slept very lightly. The pain remained even now, but it was not felt strongly, because of this sweat appeared on his face. Suddenly he opened his eyes sharply. Now the hero was in a state of shock, because when he fell asleep, he had no idea whether he would be able to wake up. After that, Hao Tian sat down and tried to at least come to his senses a little. Fortunately, this situation did not lead to the worst. He did not die that night. However, changes did occur. Strange things started flying before his eyes. Could it really be that the virus had affected him in this way? It was like a hallucination. All these things around can only be seen through a microscope. No person has such vision that would allow them to see microbes. At some point, the guy notices that he has never been able to see these viruses in person. Could it be that he has gained the ability to observe the bacteria he has been injecting into himself over the past 2 years? In fact, this ability was very useful. It seems that now the guy can absorb microorganisms and bacteria for his own needs. Now he needs to try this with some object. A metal pipe should be perfect for this task. Hao Tian took the object in his hands and tried to corrode the steel with the help of bacteria. To do this, he needed to concentrate all his strength in the right direction. After a few seconds, everything worked. The thing in his hand gradually began to change. The entire pipe became covered with uneven holes. This technique was incredibly powerful, but it required tremendous physical effort to use. At some point, the hero notices something strange. A virus has appeared near him that he has never even seen before, and he needs to study it. It really turned out to be a unique type of bacteria. It seems that when a guy absorbs different microorganisms, he is subsequently able to develop his abilities. It was simply amazing. Hao Tian not only survived the disaster, but also became even stronger. Perhaps in this way, he would be able to fully recover someday. However, now his body is still in a rather weak state. Apparently he spent too much energy, which is why he began to cough heavily. The hero himself understood this perfectly well. Now he needed to rest a little. Using this technique had squeezed even more energy out of him than he had expected. Meanwhile, in the office where he worked, 2 girls greeted their boss. It was the employee whom the hero met yesterday evening. Lin Yumu turned out to be the chairwoman of a group with assets valued at several $billion, and her nickname was the Ice Goddess. When the woman sat down on her chair, she noticed that her buttocks were hurting quite a lot. This was definitely because of the idiot who threw her on the table yesterday. Suddenly, the beauty sharply remembers what she had to endure a few hours ago. She will not be able to forget this humiliation for the rest of her life. Now the boss will never let this man go until she gets revenge. Does this guy really work here as a cleaner? How this even happened, that the Ice Goddess was bullied by a cleaner from her own company, is simply unthinkable. Now the girl urgently needs to calm down because her assistant will come soon, and she really wants to discuss this with her sister. By the way, she was already there. One of the workers told her that President Lin was already waiting for her in his office. The vice president had a very playful character, and with a gesture she indicated to the girl that she herself knew perfectly well where the Ice Goddess was. After all, her little sister had already told her everything on the phone. The assistant's name was Chu Yao Yao. She had a very bad character, because of which she liked to torment others. The girl opened the door and immediately asked her elder sister why she needed her at such an early hour. It was only 7 in the morning. Lin Yumu was glad that the younger one came so quickly and asked her to sit on the sofa next to her. They needed to talk about something. Chu Yao Yao immediately lay down and began to complain that she ran so fast on the way here that she seemed to have twisted her ankle, and after work she wanted to go to a spa. Her boss asks her to behave a little more civilized. The girl should look at herself from the outside, and what if some man walks in here now? In response, the vice president noted that no one would dare to enter here without permission. After all, this was the office of the company president. And even if such a situation does occur, not a single man will be able to leave here safe and sound. Suddenly, Chu Yaoyao asked Lin Yumu to ignore her. Her junior started talking nonsense as always. She would never act so frivolously. In fact, now was not the time to discuss such nonsense. At the moment, the only thing that mattered was what had happened to her eldest. The ice goddess then briefly described yesterday's situation. Now she needed information that the vice president was supposed to get for her. Chu Yaoyao immediately handed her an envelope. It contained all the necessary information about this cleaner, and the chances that the girl had missed something were minimal. But what could this guy have done? If his offense was really serious, then he would never be able to get away with it. Lin Yumu was very interested in Hao Tian because his origins were unknown, but at the same time, the hero looked rather suspicious. Therefore, she wanted to know if there was any interesting information about him, but nothing special was found in these documents. But this was enough for the company president. Now she had the opportunity to take proper revenge on this stupid cleaner. Because the beauty jumped up from the table so abruptly, her buttocks began to hurt again. Chu Yaoyao even became a little worried about whether everything was okay with her little sister. The ice goddess quickly replied that everything was just fine with her. And now she had a task for the vice president. The girl had to make this man suffer for the next couple of days. At the same time, Chu Yaoyao noted that this man was just a cleaner, so how could a beauty like her have anything to do with him? What if this lowers her to Hao Tian's level? This worker's salary is only 2,000. He might as well just be fired from his job. Lin Yumu immediately rejected this idea because dismissal was too soft. She wanted the younger one to do everything possible and create hell on earth for him. At some point, the vice president noticed that her eldest was a little out of sorts. Perhaps she was a little ill and that's why she was acting like a wild cat. But the ice goddess insisted that this man had offended her very much yesterday, and besides, she had been in a very bad mood for the last 2 days. When Chu Yaoyao heard this, she became a little interested. Although it was a waste of her time, for the sake of her little sister, she was willing to agree to this. Now Lin Yumu doesn't have to worry about this cleaner, but in exchange, the girl must take on some of her younger sister's responsibilities. After the vice president left, the ice goddess looked at the hero's documents for quite a while. It seemed the situation had affected her even more than she could have imagined. At some point, the girl angrily grabbed a pen and pierced Hao Tian's photo with all her strength. She would not let him go until he begged her on his knees for forgiveness. Until then, the president will be keeping a very close eye on this man, and not a single step will go unnoticed. Meanwhile, in his apartment, the guy was still sleeping. It looked like he would need much more time to recover his strength. He woke up only after 3 whole days, which was very bad, because due to absence from work, he would definitely be punished with a huge fine. Hao Tian got dressed as quickly as he could and immediately ran to work. Now he absolutely could not lose his only source of income. For now, his boss didn't have the right to fire the cleaner, so there was still a chance to stay. The hero really wanted a snack, since he hadn't eaten anything for several dozen hours, so he stopped by his favorite street food stall. The salesman knew the guy well and asked why he had been absent from work for so long. His wife, who worked at the same company, told him about it. The man also invited Hao Tian to his home for dinner. They could have a couple of glasses together. The hero seemed to tolerate alcohol well. He happily agrees, and besides, his shift ends early today, so Hao Tian will come to the merchant right after work. Meanwhile, Chu Yaoyao noticed that the cleaner hadn't been at work for 3 days, and she had already prepared a show for him. At some point, the secretary called her and said that the right person had finally arrived, and now everyone needed to behave according to the instructions. Lin Yumu also heard that her offender had come to the office and immediately ran to her little sister. The vice president called her eldest to come closer. She arrived just in time. Now they could watch the excellent performance together. Hao Tian immediately began to justify himself to the department head and asked him not to be too angry with him, but to listen to his justification first. However, the hero's boss didn't even want to hear about it, because his probationary period hadn't even begun yet, and he had already skipped 3 whole days. The guy didn't lose his composure and hinted that he was just a cleaner, a small part of the company, and maybe they would forgive him for such an offense. Besides, Hao Tian knows that someone more important didn't come to work for 8 days last month. The head of the department immediately realized that this cleaner wanted to drag him along with him. Had he really been watching him for so long? The man gestures that there is a camera right behind them, so he should stop talking nonsense, or he will be in big trouble. In response, the hero pretends not to understand anything. There is no one else here except the two of them. So why was the head of the department so worried? In fact, Hao Tian knew for sure that there were several cameras in the room. He was able to understand this as soon as he entered here. This situation looked very strange. Why were there so many hidden things in the room? His instincts told him that someone was trying to lure the guy into a trap, and that he might be in danger now. After this, the hero decides to intimidate his boss and recalls the incident when he complained about the terrible character of the company's vice president. The man immediately tried to shut the cleaner up, saying how he wasn't afraid to say such things. If he wanted to die so much, then let him do it himself. Chu Yaoyao was indignant at such words. This impudent guy dared to insult even her. Now the girl has even more reasons to turn his life into a living hell. At some point, the head of the department finally loses his temper and orders Hao Tian to shut up. From now on, he will have to be responsible for all the rooms from the 1st to the 27th floor. The guy wasn't upset at all when he heard this. He just has a lot of strength and energy to do all the dirty work. He's happy that he stayed in this place. The hero also asks the man to lend him some money. The boss couldn't even believe that this cleaner had the courage to ask for it after what happened. Hao Tian was absent from work for several days, and now he has money. If he needs it so much, then let him go and earn it. The guy accepts this answer and immediately gets to work. The vice president suggests to his sister that they transfer their target to the administrative department so that they will have more opportunities to play with him. Lin Yumu doesn't want to do this, because this cleaner is most likely an ordinary illiterate high school graduate who is not fit for anything other than cleaning. As it turned out, Hao Tian didn't even finish high school. In fact, he simply bought a diploma for several $100s. At some point, Chu Yaoyao notices that this guy is a bit too energetic. His physical strength is quite good. Maybe he would be better off as a security guard. When the ice goddess heard this, she became even more angry. This idiot does not deserve such treatment. When a beauty looks at him, she immediately falls into a rage. The vice president was even a little confused. Her sister was in a really bad mood today. Had that incident really affected her that much? Lin Yumu explains that her pride has really been hurt, and that she won't be able to sleep peacefully until she gets revenge. That's why Chu Yaoyao needs to teach the hero a good lesson as soon as possible. She should start tomorrow, because the sooner the better. The vice president still doesn't accept such a reaction to a simple misunderstanding, but she has no choice but to agree. A few hours later, Hao Tian had already finished all his work. He had managed to wash all 27 floors in a relatively short time. Now he could calmly go home. Suddenly, the hero remembers that this evening he promised to come visit a street vendor and drink a couple of glasses of alcohol with him. Now I definitely need to go to the store and buy something as a gift. Hao Tian can't come empty-handed. It's very impolite. The guy reported to his boss that he had already completed all the work. The man, having made sure that everything was in order, sent him home. However, Hao Tian once again asks the head of the department to lend him some money for food. He will give it back to the last penny as soon as he receives his salary. The boss wasn't going to give him anything. How could this janitor have the nerve to ask for such a thing after he almost ruined his career this morning? The events then moved to a famous street where people constantly disappear. This area was considered one of the most dangerous in the city. There are bandits from all sorts of gangs constantly roaming around here. And if you were unlucky enough to become someone's target, you were at great risk of losing your life. Right now, a girl was walking down one of the alleys. Apparently, she had ended up there unknowingly, since being alone in such places in the evening was too dangerous. At some point, the stranger noticed that there was someone behind her. The girl immediately became scared and decided to speed up her pace. But in fact, it wasn't a bandit at all. Apparently, Hao Tian just made too serious a face, so she mistook him for a criminal. There were other people here who most likely had very bad intentions. It would be better to warn the stranger. The hero shouted after her and asked her to stop. It would be best for the girl to stay close to him now. That way she would have a better chance of staying safe. However, the stranger only became even more frightened and called the guy a pervert. Now she simply started running away. Hao Tian didn't expect such a reaction at all. Does he really look like some kind of maniac? This is too much. For some reason, the stranger thought that the hero looked indecent. She thought that most likely it was again one of Huang Mao's people. Suddenly, a man appeared right in front of her. Most likely, this is the same bandit that the girl is so afraid of. The villain has clearly been pursuing his goal for quite some time. Huang Mao calls it an amazing coincidence that they met here again. But why is the beauty in such a hurry to get home? By the way, it's his birthday today, so the bandit invites the girl to celebrate at his house, but the stranger in response asks him to leave her alone and forget him forever. In turn, the villain had no intention of doing this at all. He began to behave very obscenely and touched her face with his hand. Was she really in such a hurry to go on a date with a guy? The beauty should choose her words better, because everyone around knows who Huang Mao is. Now the bandit will let her go only when she does everything she is ordered to do. The girl flatly refuses such a terrible offer. If this scoundrel doesn't calm down right now, she will call the police. Suddenly, some object flew straight towards them. As it turned out, someone had thrown a large red apple towards the bandit. The throw was so powerful that the bully even started bleeding from his mouth. He didn't expect it at all, so he didn't have time to dodge. One of his assistants immediately rushed to help, and the girl tried to determine where this fruit came from, whether that guy really helped her. As it turned out, it really was Hao Tian. He decided to follow the stranger for a while, and he was right. If not for his help, the beauty could have suffered. However, the guy bought these apples as a gift, so he doesn't want to lose them because of some idiot. He should return the fruit back. Huang Mao came to his senses a little and stood up. He couldn't believe that there were still fools who tried to act like heroes. Hao Tian wasn't really someone who believed in justice in the world. He just wanted to see if he could knock out this weakling with one throw. The stranger was so scared that she still considered the hero a pervert. It seemed to her that he also wanted to do something to her. Huang Mao decided that the guy belonged to some gang and tried to negotiate with him. They could split the loot between themselves, but the bandit would be first. But only on the condition that Hao Tian would help push this girl into the car. This way, the hooligan wanted to get away with it. But he is unlikely to succeed, because the hero ordered him to immediately explain what exactly he was going to do with this innocent stranger. The bandits clearly didn't expect such an answer. Usually only their kind appear on such dangerous streets. Could this guy really be different? Hao Tian revealed that he was actually the general manager of the Red Scarf organization, which specializes in helping in dangerous situations. Given the current situation, the girl can entrust the management to him. The company's services cost only 1,000 yuan, but if you pay a little extra, there is a chance to cripple these two ugly aliens. Huang Mao and his assistant were even more surprised. They had been called many bad names before, but this was the first time they had been called ugly aliens. In addition, if a girl wants to get rid of this problem forever, there is a premium option. It costs only 5,000 yuan. At the same time, the hero notes that the company is private, so they do not accept counteroffers. The stranger should make a decision right now. The bandit was furious that this weakling dared to insult his handsome face. Now he would deal with him using his favorite knife. While the villain was running towards the guy, the stranger shouted that she was ready to take advantage of the most expensive service. Now Hao Tian could act. He thanked the client for her excellent choice. Now she would be able to see how correct her choice was. At that very moment, the knife blade was just a few centimeters away from the hero, yet his face looked incredibly calm. As it turned out, there were reasons for this. Because the guy was able to stop the bandit with just one slap, the blow was incredibly powerful. When Huang Mao missed him, he flew back a few meters and stopped only after hitting a hard concrete wall. Moreover, the bandit spat out several teeth into his palm. Was Hao Tian's slap really that powerful? This made the bully furious. No one in this area would dare to humiliate him like that. And now he wants revenge more than anything in the world. However, the hero was not at all interested in these stories. He simply walked up to the villain and kicked him in the face with all his might. The assistant, in turn, could not believe his eyes. Could it really be that his boss had been defeated by some random person passing by? The second hooligan decides that the girl is to blame for everything that happened and attacks her with a knife, for which she must die today. But fortunately, the guy was much faster. He managed to grab him by the neck from behind. Now this scoundrel will get what he deserves. The hero squeezed his throat with all his strength with his elbow. The bandit didn't even try to resist, but simply dropped the knife on the ground. And after that, exhausted, he fell right onto the hard asphalt. It looks like the hooligan was unconscious. He clearly deserves it. The girl was very surprised at how strong Hao Tian was. He was clearly an unusual person. Perhaps he had worked in the police before. Huang Mao tried to run away, but he failed. The guy immediately noticed this and stepped on him with all his strength with his foot. Now, the mission to eliminate the two pursuers has been successfully completed. If the stranger wants to get rid of them forever, then it costs a little more. For a small fee, Hao Tian is actually capable of making the two disappear forever, and the police will never find a trace of them. The girl was sure that this man was capable of doing what he said, but she didn't want anyone to die at all. These idiots had already learned a good lesson. So she simply thanks her savior and blesses him for his actions. But the hero doesn't really need blessings, he needs money. The stranger had only 300 yen in her wallet. Apparently, she did not have rich parents. The girl just started working recently, so she has very little money, and she will definitely pay the rest back a little later. Hao Tian agreed to this. The client can pay the remaining amount in installments. The interest rate is 10% for the first year. But if a girl deceives their organization, they will follow her for the rest of her life. This is how they fight dishonest clients. This stranger's name was Song Ron Rong. She worked in the surgical department of the city's First People's Hospital, and she would definitely have the money to pay the rest. The hero saw sincerity in the girl's eyes and believed it. Besides, he will not take payment from her for this month. After all, she is really in a difficult situation. After that, they parted ways. Hao Tian offered to walk his new acquaintance home, but the girl refused, since she only had a few dozen meters left to walk. But for some reason, the guy continued to walk along the same road as Song Ronrong, and they even went into the house where the girl's apartment was located. From this, she asks the hero to believe in the truth of her words. Hao Tian does not have to follow her all the way to her home. She will be able to pay off everything down to the last penny. As it turned out, the guy had no doubt about it. The fact that they entered this house together was a coincidence. After all, the guy also needed to be here. An old friend had invited him to dinner, and they were planning to drink a few glasses of alcohol together. Song Ronrong was very surprised when she found out about this. There were only a few apartments in their building, and her mother had also told her that they would have a guest today. Suddenly, she calls the hero by name. He was very embarrassed when he heard it. How does this girl know such a thing? They met a couple of hours ago. At some point, it dawns on him that the street vendor is most likely her father. To be honest, it was obvious, since they have the same last names. The man's name was De Song. His daughter imagined today's guest a little differently. She thought that this man was several decades older. Hao Tian, in turn, also couldn't imagine that the hot dog seller's daughter was so beautiful, which even made him feel a little embarrassed. The hero asks his new acquaintance not to call him uncle because the difference in their ages is very small. But Song Ronrong believed that this was right. After all, the guest is a friend of her father. By the way, since this person is actually a friend of their family, then perhaps he will do a great favor and will not charge her for those services. However, Hao Tian didn't want to do this, because they had already made a contract. It could no longer be broken or changed. The money would still have to be returned. Seeing all this, the girl tried to get at least a small discount for herself. The hero agreed not to take a percentage of the commission for her. Song Ronrong was satisfied with this and thanked her friend for his kindness. The guy couldn't believe that the food seller had such a cute and cunning daughter. Suddenly, a woman walking behind them on the stairs addressed them, and from her speech it became clear that she knew who they were. It turned out to be the girl's mother. She was surprised that these two knew each other. Apparently, the hero had been a friend of their family for quite a long time. After that, everyone went into the apartment and sat down at the table. The first thing the men decided to do was drink one glass to mark the meeting. The food would be on the table in a couple of minutes. Hao Tian sincerely asks not to worry about this. He is not so hungry that he should rush Song Ronrong and her mother for his sake. Meanwhile, they were talking in the kitchen. The woman was surprised how these two managed to meet halfway here. Had they really never seen each other before? This was indeed the case. Mom notes that although the hero is a very good guy, he has no ambition at all and is too lazy. His daughter asked him not to say such things, because their guest could hear everything. But in fact, the guy had already noticed their conversation and was a little upset. Meanwhile, Huang Mao and his assistant were making excuses to their boss for their defeat. Now they all need to take revenge on the offender. The gang leader wanted to know the name of the man who dared to attack his people. The sooner they got this information, the sooner they could get rid of him. However, there were some problems with this, because the attacker did not give his name, but only said that he belonged to a certain organization called the Red Scarf. So we need to work with what we have. The boss orders his people to take care of the girl first, and he will personally take care of this red scarf. Within a few minutes, the entire table was covered with food. Hao Tian was convinced that his new girlfriend was an excellent cook. Everything was very tasty. Perhaps the food seemed so attractive to him because the boy had not eaten for a whole day. The owners of the house asked him to eat as much as he could. The woman also worked in the same company as him, so she was only interested in one question. Did the hero offend any of the management? Hao Tian replies that everything is fine. He just had health problems because of which he missed a couple of days of work. So the senior manager was a little angry with him. The owner of the house was surprised by one thing. For some reason, wherever the guy went, the camera was constantly pointed at him, as if someone was deliberately watching him. This information greatly interested the hero. He understood that someone was watching him, but he was unaware that it was happening so diligently. Now they can start an investigation. It was very bad. How could a simple job as a cleaner become so dangerous? Song Ranrong noticed that the guest was very upset, and she felt very sorry for him. She needed to think of some way to defuse the situation. The girl notes that even if the guy offended someone, he has nothing to worry about, because for someone like him, it won't be difficult to find another job. In fact, Hao Tian didn't want to change his profession. After all, he still manages to get along with everyone, and besides, this job is very inconspicuous. The man really liked this answer. He considered this the most important thing in life. First of all, you need to remain calm even in a difficult situation. After that, they spent a few more hours at dinner. The hero was truly very grateful for the invitation. He had long wanted to sit with someone. After a while, the guy had to leave. After all, he absolutely couldn't be late tomorrow, and Song Ranrong was going to see him off. The girl wanted to ask her new friend not to tell her parents anything about today's situation. They don't need to worry about it. Hao Tian promises her that he will keep his mouth shut, but now she needs to go back, because he doesn't want to save his friend again. Song Ranrong was a little embarrassed by these words. This man really turned out to be very kind. He can definitely be trusted as a brother. Suddenly, her mother approached her from behind. The woman was interested in whether they had really never met before. The daughter once again replied that this was exactly the case. In fact, she was worried that her child might have an affair with someone like this guy, who, in the woman's opinion, was not good enough for her. The girl, in turn, asked her mother to speak more quietly, since the guest had gone very close and could overhear their conversation again. The hero really heard all of this perfectly. Only a completely deaf person could have missed such loud screams. Song Ranrong asks her mother to stop this stupid talk. She really shouldn't worry about anything, because the girl already has a boyfriend. The woman immediately began to bombard her daughter with a bunch of questions. She needed to know where this man worked and what his monthly salary was. Meanwhile, Hao Tian returned back to his apartment. This place was very different from the cozy house where he had dinner today. But the worst thing was the hero's illness. Now he could only guess what would happen to his body in the near future. At first glance, everything seemed fine, because after he lost consciousness a few days ago, nothing bad happened to him. Now the guy should think about whether he needs to continue taking all these substances. Perhaps such procedures are no longer necessary. Hao Tian decides to just go to bed, because tomorrow he needs to go to the office and find out who is watching him so carefully. The next morning, the vice president was going to give this guy another show, but yesterday was really just a little test. The hero just arrived at work. The girl orders all her people to take their places. Now this cleaner will feel her revenge. Chu Yaoyao sincerely wants to make Hao Tian suffer as soon as possible. This is the only way she can help her older sister. As soon as the guy entered the office area, the security guard suddenly turned his attention to him and came out of his booth with a baseball bat in his hands. And the next moment, the man threw the sports equipment straight towards the hero. Apparently, such instructions were given to him by his superiors. However, such a cheap trick wouldn't work on Hao Tian. It was no problem for him to easily grab the bat with his own hand without even looking back. And after that, with the same ease, she returned it back to the guard. Only the man did not have such skills and simply got hit in the face with a sports instrument. The vice president thought it was just a coincidence. But I didn't care, because she had something else prepared for this cleaner. Suddenly, a man with a wastewater tank in his hands started driving straight towards the guy, and it was immediately clear that the man was not in control of the situation. The worker with the cart ran straight towards Hao Tian, and the hero didn't even change his expression, but simply continued to calmly walk forward. At some point, he simply abruptly stepped aside. This time, the girl again failed. To get Hao Tian, something more serious was needed. In the end, the plumber simply flew further and tripped over some rock, ending up completely covered in that stinking water. The vice president couldn't believe her eyes. How a simple cleaner could get away with all her tricks so easily, now she'll have to come up with something else. After this, the hero went into his boss's office. The man ordered him to sit down on a chair. They needed to talk about something now. In fact, this was done so that the guy would sit on a pre-broken chair. Although he was lucky to avoid everything that happened before, now he will definitely get caught. The guy, unsuspecting, was about to sit down on the chair. He couldn't understand why the head of the department had such a serious look. But for some reason the furniture turned out to be completely normal. Hao Tian calmly sat up and asked what was the matter. Chu Yao Yao couldn't understand how this was possible. She had checked everything herself. This chair should have broken right now. The man, in turn, also expected a completely different outcome. Besides, he really didn't intend to talk about anything. Now he needed to improvise. The head of the department could think of nothing better to do than to scold the cleaner once again for doing his job poorly. According to him, the worker left a complete mess after yesterday's shift. Meanwhile, the hero was thinking that if the person who was watching him had the ability to control the cameras, then he definitely occupied a high position. As punishment, his boss orders the guy to clean the bathrooms from the 1st to the 27th floor 3 times a day. Hao Tian doesn't see a problem with this and calmly goes to work. After which he calmly goes about his business, and the man is left alone in his office, wondering how this cleaner managed to fool everyone. The head of the department decides to check how one can sit on this broken chair to see if it is really fully functional. To do this, the boss sits directly on him, but immediately feels a very sharp pain below. He should not have acted so confidently. Now Chu Yao Yao was completely convinced that this cleaner was not just an ordinary guy. This chair was definitely faulty. How did he manage to do such a thing? Right now, the company president came into her room, and the first thing she asked was how her assistant's plan had gone, and whether she had managed to teach that fool a lesson. The vice president reported that dealing with Hao Tian turned out to be much more difficult than expected, and she hadn't even been able to get a proper rest all day. But she still had an ace up her sleeve. The girl had been planning to do something special for a long time, and this situation simply forced her to do just that. Lin Yumu was curious about this secret technique, so she walked closer to her little sister and she whispered it into her ear. When the snow goddess listened to everything to the end, she doubted a little. Even she thought that this was too much even for such a case. Chu Yao Yao thinks that her elder is just too kind, and she doesn't need to worry about it at all. She can take care of everything for her. The company president agrees, and besides, she has a very important meeting this afternoon, so the vice president will be in charge here for a while. Her sister tells her that everything will be fine, she will definitely do her job well, and the girl definitely shouldn't worry about it. After that, Chu Yao Yao continued to watch the hero, who, as usual, was busily cleaning the floors on one of the many floors. At the same time, the guy understood perfectly well that his pursuer was watching him even now, when he was busy with simple cleaning. This was very annoying. While searching for answers, he wondered if the girl he had offended a couple of days ago might be behind it all. But he still had that photo, so she probably wouldn't dare do that. But this cannot continue for long. Now Hao Tian must first of all determine where his pursuer is. It's quite difficult to do, but this person should most likely be somewhere in the administrative department on the 8th floor. When the hero got up there, he was very embarrassed. There were very pretty young girls everywhere. This was the company president's female army. The guy looked everything over carefully for a while and tried to look natural, but none of these workers had anything to do with the surveillance. Now Hao Tian needed to think further, but right now there really was too little information. Maybe he just needed to wait. Meanwhile, the vice president deliberately spilled a large amount of printer ink on the floor. Apparently, this is part of her secret plan. All this liquid needed to be cleaned up immediately, so of course a cleaner was called in, and the hero was ordered to go up to the president's office as quickly as possible. After all, the copy room is very dirty. The worker needs to immediately drop everything he's doing and clean this black liquid from the floor. The guy immediately realized that the same person who was watching the cameras was behind all this, and now it would be even easier for him to fix this problem. If someone wants to deal with him, he will be happy to play the game. He has already had to get out of situations that were tens of times more difficult. Hao Tian immediately went into the elevator and went up to the desired floor. When the doors opened, he immediately saw a rather strange picture. The first thing that caught his eye was the thick, dark liquid that had spread all over the floor and was already approaching his feet. Almost the entire room was covered in this substance. The girl tried her best. Does she really think that anyone will believe that what happened was an accident? Chu Yao Yao immediately put on an innocent face and pretended that she was very sorry. It was just that her assistant was absent from work today, and she had to cover for her. The guy understood perfectly well that his boss did this on purpose, but he was interested in hearing her excuses, so he asked her about it directly. The girl replied that she had simply dropped the ink by accident, but even the most clumsy person in the world couldn't do that. Then the vice president continued to play her role. She also pretended to be very afraid of her boss. If the president saw this, she would be very angry. Hao Tian had encountered many different people in his life who wanted to deceive him and even kill him. But none of them succeeded. They only brought death upon themselves. The hero tells Chu Yaoyao that this mess will only take a few minutes to sort out, but she should be more careful next time. The vice president, in turn, was surprised that he was not at all interested in his boss as a woman, since she was a real beauty. What was wrong with this guy? At some point, the girl thought that her charm was diminishing with age, but this was complete nonsense. The beauty was still just as beautiful, and she would be able to charm the hero in any case. Hao Tian, in turn, could not understand why his boss looked so happy. Was she really so satisfied with this stupid dirty trick? Suddenly, Chu Yaoyao came closer and looked at the guy's badge. As it turned out, she had a younger brother with the same name. It was just an incredible coincidence. It was immediately clear that the beauty was trying to seduce the hero. He, in turn, noticed that the button on the girl's collar seemed about to come off. The vice president pretended to be embarrassed. What a bad person this employee was. He only thought about one thing. Did he really have nowhere else to look? In fact, her acting turned out to be lousy. She is still too young and inexperienced to play such games. When Chu Yaoyao realized that her plan was not going quite as she wanted, she began to get angry. How dare he behave like that? 10 minutes later, the room was already clean. The beauty praised the cleaner. He was a real great guy. He deserved a bonus for such work. However, Hao Tian simply asks if there is any other work for him. If that is all, then he needs to go, because he still has a lot of other things to do. Suddenly, the girl asks the hero to wait a little. Today, he had a hard day because of her mistake. She made tea for him as a thank you. The guy, in turn, replies that everything is fine. Besides, he is not tired at all and does not want to drink now. Most likely there is something wrong with this tea. Chu Yaoyao had indeed added a large dose of some kind of drug to the drink. If he didn't drink it now, all this work would be in vain. Therefore, the vice president decides to play on emotions and claims that she has never offered tea to anyone before. And by the way, it is quite difficult to prepare. Is Hao Tian really that harmful? In the end, the hero agrees. In fact, he wasn't afraid of such nonsense at all. Now he was interested in what this whole performance was for. It was impossible to determine what was in the drink by its smell, but most likely the girl had used some kind of laxative. Even a super virus couldn't help but kill this guy, and a small dose of medicine certainly won't make him worse. A few seconds later, he completely emptied the glass. Chu Yaoyao was happy when she saw this, and the worker thanked the boss. It was very refreshing. However, now that the beauty had made her move, she shouldn't blame Hao Tian for self-defense, because if he didn't resist, he wouldn't be able to live up to her expectations. That's why the guy, using his unique ability, will do the same to the girl. She will feel what it's like to have a stomachache. After this, the hero wants to tease the vice president a little. He suddenly screams, in response to which the girl even got a little scared. The guy wants to tell you that he has been noticing strange things lately, and he is interested in hearing Chu Yaoyao's opinion on this matter. The vice president couldn't understand what this employee wanted from her, but it turned out that Hao Tian laid all his cards on the table and said that most likely the girl from the company's management was offended by him. After all, in the last 2 days he began to notice that wherever he went, cameras were constantly watching him, and to turn this around, someone from the administrative department would be needed. The vice president was surprised by the guy's insight. He managed to figure everything out pretty quickly, and she replied that there was nothing strange about it. The hero says that he thought the same at first, because he is just a simple cleaner, and his position at the company does not align with such attention. This could only mean one thing. Someone from the company's management fell in love with him, because he is a very good and kind person. However, at the same time, it is a little creepy, because he has no money and no connections, which means that the woman who is spying on him cannot find anyone better. Apparently, she is very stupid and also ugly, and her character is even worse. These words hurt Sister Lin Yumu to the very heart. How does he allow you to say such things? After this, Chu Yaoyao increases the bacteria of the virus that was added to his tea and plans to infect the girl in the same way. This was his plan. The guy put the molecule in his hand and then touched the vice president's shoulder with it, and he also thanks her for listening to him. And now the hero must finally return to work because he still had quite a lot to do and very little time left. Chu Yao Yao couldn't get over the insults directed at her little sister for a long time. This cleaner was really being incredibly impudent. However, in just 3 hours, everything will change. She really wants to see what this smart guy will do when the laxative takes effect on him. As it turns out, this virus doesn't start acting immediately, but rather after about 3 hours. Right now, the guy was standing at the bus stop, waiting for his bus. He was a little upset that he would not see how his boss would feel the effects of the medicine, when suddenly a very expensive red car drove up to him. As it turned out, it was the vice president. She pretended that it was an incredible coincidence. The girl did not expect to meet him here after work. The hero immediately realized that the boss had something else in mind. She probably wanted to put Hao Tian in an even more humiliating position. Chu Yao Yao thanks the worker for helping her out this afternoon, and the girl feels it is her duty to thank him and treat him to dinner. The guy started saying that it was actually unnecessary, but at the same time he wasn't at all shy about confidently climbing into the car. The first thing he asked was where they were going to eat, and as it turned out, it was one of the best places in the area. The vice president stepped on the gas, and at that moment the car picked up tremendous speed. Soon the hero would see everything with his own eyes. At some point, Hao Tian notices that they have already left the city. Don't they need to go to a restaurant? Are they really going to some village? In fact, the girl just wanted to take him away and see how this smart guy would behave in a place where there was not a single toilet. So she lies to him that they are going to a farm with a restaurant, and they say that the food there is so delicious that she really wants to try it too. Hao Tian, in turn, immediately guessed everything. His boss definitely wanted to see how he would behave in such a humiliating situation. But to her great regret, Chu Yao Yao didn't realize that she was about to taste her own medicine right now, and its effect would begin very soon. In fact, there were exactly 5 seconds left, and right now, both the driver and the passenger of the car began counting down this time. However, for some reason nothing happened at all, and the girl began to wonder what could have gone wrong in her plan, and whether the drug had been spoiled. Or maybe it had expired. Either way, it didn't work, and now she needs to find a way out of this situation. Suddenly, Chu Yao Yao felt a very strong pain in her stomach. It was so terrible that she could hardly continue driving the car. At the same time, she could not understand what was happening to her. The girl had not eaten anything today that could lead to such bad feelings. The pain in her stomach had not gone away for several minutes. The vice president could no longer bear it. It seemed she would have to stop right in the middle of the road. It was no longer possible to endure this torment, so Chu Yao Yao opened the door and took some napkins. Now she had to hurry. Hao Tian sarcastically asked his boss where she was going since there was no restaurant here. In response, the girl called him a fool and ordered him to forget about food, and then quickly walked as deep into the bushes as possible. The guy continued to make fun of her and asked why she needed to climb into the bushes, since it could be unsafe there. In fact, she could have simply said that she wanted to go to the toilet. Otherwise, the hero would have thought that his boss had some strange fetishes. The vice president became even more angry when she heard this. What could possibly come to mind when a person runs into the bushes with a piece of paper? She tries to walk a little further so that this fool and the cars passing by definitely don't notice her. She's already had enough shame for today. Suddenly, the hero asks her to be as careful as possible, because snakes often live here, and if one of them bites the beauty, she should call for help. In fact, Hao Tian had simply mocked the girl once again. She couldn't believe that this idiot would allow himself to behave like that towards her. At some point, Chu Yao Yao's condition became much worse, and now the cutting pain in her stomach spread throughout her entire body, and it seemed as if she was about to lose consciousness. After this, the girl began to cough very heavily. She could not come to her senses. Her body literally weakened with each passing minute. After some time, the vice president could no longer stand normally on her feet, and her arms and legs began to shake violently. What was wrong with her? The hero notices that his boss has been gone for quite a long time. Could something bad have happened to her? All this time he was completely confident that such an insignificant virus could not in any way harm a person or cause serious consequences. Therefore, Hao Tian decided to wait a little longer, while some anxiety was visible on his face, and a drop of sweat even appeared on his cheek. After a couple of minutes, Chu Yao Yao finally returned, but she looked quite bad. From her appearance, it was immediately clear that the girl was very ill. She only had enough strength to ask the guy in a very quiet voice for help. He should call an ambulance for her as soon as possible. And after this, the beauty loses her last strength and falls unconscious. The hero barely managed to catch her. Now he must urgently help her. For some reason, the vice president started bleeding from the mouth. Apparently, Hao Tian did something wrong when he tried to infect his boss with a simple virus. The hero didn't know what to do at that moment. There were probably too few hospitals in the world that could help her. He had to figure it out himself. He had to act very quickly, because most likely the girl had very little time left. If he didn't manage to fix everything, she would die. The first thing the hero does is use his unique ability to pull the bacteria out of Chu Yaoyao's body, which usually always works. However, this time something went wrong. For some reason, the virus absolutely refused to obey and rejected any attempts to touch it. At this moment, Hao Tian was quite scared. At this rate he risked being late. This girl was about to leave this world. In fact, since the extraction failed, the only way to fix the situation is to completely eliminate the offending virus. This was a way of fighting a disease with another disease. Such a method is quite complicated and dangerous. But now, there was no choice. Moreover, there was a high risk that it would not work at all, in which case, not only Chu Yaoyao would die, but the hero himself as well. To do this, the guy needs to use his special visualization to increase the bacteria several hundred times, and then invest as much energy as possible and turn an ordinary bacterium into something much more advanced. After some time, the virus began to change dramatically. From an ordinary cell, it began to transform into something resembling an intelligent creature. In the end, the result was a rather terrifying creature. It was nothing more than a complete visualization of the virus that was in the vice president's body. This creature immediately began to behave very viciously and hostilely. Most likely, it could attack the guy at any moment. It was the first time in his life that he had seen something like this. This creature looked quite ugly. Now he needed to destroy it as soon as possible. To do this, Hao Tian took out a secret weapon from the soles of his boots. It was a small but very sharp knife. He did not want to linger here for long. Therefore, he will simply eliminate this terrible creature with a few blows. After all, the guy himself summoned him into this world. Immediately after this, the creature rushed at the hero with terrible screams. Most likely its main weapon was the ugly purple tentacles on its arms. Fortunately, Hao Tian could still move quite well and managed to dodge at the right moment. Now he had the opportunity to counterattack. To inflict as much damage on the enemy as possible, the hero infused special molecules into the blade of his knife, causing it to appear to burn. And after that, with one strong and quick blow, he cut the monster in half. This vile yellow creature will no longer harm anyone. The guy never thought that he would get into so much trouble. Because he used his ability, he needs to think more carefully about his actions. Now he would always act with caution, otherwise there was a very high chance of harming both himself and the people around him. This virus turned out to be quite strong. It took a lot of effort to eliminate it, and now the guy's body simply might not be able to withstand it. Hao Tian started bleeding from his mouth and had a severe headache. In his attempts to save his boss, he had caused himself great harm. The hero survived many dangerous missions, and even on them he never managed to receive such serious injuries. Is he really going to die here now because he released a minor virus with his power? After some time, Chu Yaoyao came to her senses. It was almost evening outside, and she couldn't understand what had happened to her. Having come to her senses a little, the girl gets up from the ground. She still felt unwell and had a pretty bad headache. But this was nothing compared to the state she had been in a few hours ago. Her stomach actually didn't hurt at all. Suddenly, the vice president notices that Hao Tian is lying next to her, unconscious, and there is a fairly large pool of blood near him. The girl tried to find out what happened to the guy and why so much blood was pouring out of his mouth, but he was not going to come to his senses. Chu Yaoyao immediately realized that the hero had saved her, but in the end, he himself had suffered greatly, although she did not understand how this had happened, but she had to help. To do this, the vice president immediately took out her phone and called an ambulance. Doctors should arrive at the right place in just a few minutes. In fact, the guy did not completely lose consciousness, but was simply in pain shock. At that moment, he remembered his past. As it turned out, Hao Tian lost his parents in early childhood and was adopted by an old man who raised him as a son for a long time. Until the age of 8, the boy lived in the mountains and studied a wide variety of medical books and textbooks, although he was not particularly interested in them. And already at the age of 12, he independently learned to dissect a corpse and examine various parts of the human body. At that time, the young man was sure that his future destiny was to become a doctor. But everything turned out quite differently. The war made its own adjustments to everything. The old fool sent his adopted son into the very mouth of the volcano. Every day he was on the brink of death. But still, the war does not last forever. And after it ended, the guy went on a trip around the world, although he thought that he would now become a mercenary soldier. The hero was young and very cold-blooded, so he did not leave anyone even the slightest chance of survival. And when he saved up enough money, he decided to get out of this dark business. To do this, his adoptive father faked the boy's death, after which the old man asked his son to join the National Division as a freelance agent. This old man was too good at his job, so when Hao Tian received his new documents, no one had any questions about his new identity. But one day, while he was on a mission, he received a message that his adoptive father had died and left him a small wooden box as an inheritance. The will said that the boy would only be able to open it when he became strong enough. This old man always behaved very mysteriously. The next day, the hero tried to open it and did everything possible to do so, but it did not yield any results, after which he threw himself into work and spent a lot of time on assignments with a group of Secret Service agents, which continued until that mission in Africa. For Hao Tian, this was a chance to have a normal life. He thought it was great to have a quiet job, but many people don't appreciate such little things. After some time, the hero was taken to the hospital. Chu Yao Yao first asked the doctor how her savior was feeling now. The doctor asked her to go to a quiet place and said that the patient was fine, just a little weak. The girl's tests had also been checked and she was healthy. The vice president couldn't believe her ears. How was this possible? Because just a couple of hours ago, she felt like she was about to die. All this indicated that Hao Tian was able to pull her out of the other world at the cost of his own health. He truly sacrificed himself. As the boy lay unconscious in a hospital bed, his body suddenly began to change, and an unusual aura appeared around him. As a result, all of his bones and muscles seemed to have reached another level of strength. Now they were at least 3 times stronger and more durable. When this happened, the guy immediately came to his senses, although he still didn't understand where he was. But fortunately, everything was okay with him. At the same time, Hao Tian clearly understood that something incomprehensible had happened to his body, because all the pain instantly evaporated somewhere. Could it be that all the meridians were truly cleared? The hero would never have thought that he would be able to cross the line that he could not cross for years, only after being at death's door. The guy's strange behavior attracted the attention of his roommate. The man looked at him with a surprised look and could not understand what was happening. Hao Tian was able to become several times stronger just by using his profound strength for rough calculation. It was simply unbelievable. Perhaps with his current powers, he will finally be able to open the box that his late adoptive father left him. Chu Yao Yao heard that her savior had regained consciousness and went into his room with a basket of fruit, asking how the patient was feeling. The hero replied that everything was fine with him, and he was also glad that his boss was also completely healthy, which meant the sacrifices were not in vain. The girl sincerely thanks Hao Tian for his help, because she survived only thanks to him. She had no doubts about it. In fact, the guy was worried about one question, because in their days, you can thank someone for saving you in a slightly different way. Chu Yao Yao didn't quite understand what he was talking about, and the patient misunderstood the hero's words and decided not to interfere with the couple. However, Hao Tian had something completely different in mind. He just looked at the calendar and realized that he hadn't come to work for several days. His boss advises him not to worry about it, because she can easily take time off for him. Their company treats its employees very humanely. The guy noted that this girl looks very smart, but does she really not understand what is wanted from her? He is very poor, and therefore will not be able to pay the hospital bill. In fact, the girl has already paid for his treatment in full, so all he can do is rest and recover as quickly as possible. The hero felt a little awkward. His boss should have told him this much earlier, since he had been worried about it all day. However, now that he wanted to talk about how much his help had cost that day, Chu Yao Yao still couldn't understand what he meant. Hao Tian hints that the vice president herself understands the whole situation. If he had not come to the rescue then, she would have definitely left this world. The girl was, of course, grateful to him. But isn't this man acting too self-confident? He really is a complete fool. Chu Yao Yao says he can pay 1,000 for this service, but the guy says that it is too little, not even enough to pay the bills at this time. In this case, the vice president is ready to pay him 10,000. But the hero does not believe that such a beauty can value her own life at such a sum. The girl couldn't believe that this fool dared to demand so much money from her. Did he really expect to get 100,000 from her? This was indeed the case. After all, she was from the president's office, which meant that such a sum was like a drop in the ocean for her. The vice president was furious at these statements, but tried to restrain herself and replied that before making a deal, she needed to discuss one issue. She really wanted to know if Hao Tian had taken advantage of his position when the girl was lying on the ground unconscious and completely helpless. In this way, the boss wanted to threaten the hero that if he continued to demand money from her, she could sue him. Besides, Chu Yaoyao also saved his life after the guy lost consciousness. So it could be said that they were even. After this, the hero understands that it is better not to argue with this beauty, so he asks her to forget about the money. Everything was fine anyway. When the girl heard this, she immediately changed her expression to a smile. This fool really thought that he could outsmart her. If it came to that, the hero was not going to lie around here any longer, since his health was excellent and he wanted to go home. This way, he will at least be able to collect the deposit for his treatment, and Hao Tian will thus receive the money for his treatment back. As a result, he actually managed to pull it off, and now the guy had 20,000 in his hands, which was pretty good. The hero was very happy when the funds were handed over to him. His boss paid a deposit of several thousand, which would be enough for him to last for a while. By the way, she still hasn't told Hao Tian her name. The vice president finally told her what her name is. Now they are officially acquainted. The guy calls Chu Yaoyao's name very beautiful, and now that everything is over, he has some business. They will only meet in the office. As it turned out, the beauty was going to invite him to dinner today, but now this fool can forget about such an offer. And she was also very interested in one thing. For some reason, this guy now looked much healthier than before. After some time, Hao Tian was already at home. More than anything in the world, he wanted to quickly find the small wooden box and open it. However, he could not find the thing. He had already rummaged through absolutely every cabinet in his house, but it was nowhere to be found. Only a few hours later, the hero remembers that he had been using this thing as a stand for the corner of a table for quite some time. His adoptive father must have left him something good as an inheritance. He needs to take a close look at what's inside. Even with his current strength, the guy was far from immediately able to open this box. The elderly man really hid everything securely. In the end, after a few minutes, he still succeeds. But there was nothing valuable inside, only some kind of tablet with hieroglyphs. Hao Tian continued to stare silently inside for a while, wondering if this was really all that had been left to him as an inheritance. And after that, he got very angry and threw the trinket on the floor, and for this, he had to work for so many years and gain strength. This old fool, even after death, manages to mock his adopted son in every possible way. It's just ridiculous. The hero couldn't stop thinking about it until the evening. He was so angry at his adoptive father that he couldn't calm down. The wooden box was behind him the whole time, and at some point it began to glow with an unusual blue light. Suddenly, an image appeared from behind her that looked exactly like the man who had taken the boy from the orphanage all those years ago. Hao Tian didn't even notice him right away. He only noticed what was happening when this strange spirit addressed him directly. The guy turned around and couldn't believe his eyes. Could it really be his adoptive father? But what did that even mean? It turned out that this was a message from an elderly man who was sure that when his son watched this video, he would no longer be alive. The hero thought that this old man once again wanted to play some kind of game with him and had come up with a strange task for him, or something like that. However, everything was different. The spirit claimed that if Hao Tian could see him, it meant that his power had reached the point of meridian purification, which was both good and bad. In fact, this man died not of old age, but from a severe injury he received during a martial arts competition. The hero couldn't believe what he had just heard. Had he really had to live in ignorance for so many years? What else had his adoptive father been hiding from him all this time? As it turns out, the old man is actually the head of the palace of an ancient sect. This organization was in a very protracted conflict with another clan. Therefore, every 30 years, both sides compete according to the rules of martial arts, each sect putting forward several of its best fighters. Today, the enemy clan has a huge advantage, because their organization had only 3 disciples in the previous generation. And now it's even worse. the elderly man suddenly extended his hand forward and pointed his index finger straight at the guy. As strange as it may sound, Hao Tian is the only disciple of their martial arts palace in this generation. The guy found it hard to believe. The tablet that is in the small wooden box is actually an ancient book, the masterpiece of their school. He must practice well in order to return the former strength of their clan. The hero was very angry when he found out all this. This old man always hid something from him. Isn't this just a new way to send him to certain death? His adoptive father knew everything in advance and understood perfectly well that his son would behave exactly this way, so he prepared one thing in advance. As it turned out, the moment the guy opened this thing, he was poisoned by a very rare poison. If he doesn't manage to learn a special technique from the book, he won't live even 10 years. Hao Tian couldn't believe that this old idiot was ruining his life even while he was in the afterlife and rushed to the box, but the spirit immediately disappeared. This book, like the technique it describes, was called the subjugation of the 9 heavens and stars. Now the hero needs to persistently improve himself. If he succeeds, he will not only get rid of the poison in his body, but will also be able to reach a new kingdom. The elderly man guesses that his son is furious now, but he should just accept it. He is destined to become the heir. After what happened, the guy wondered how the super virus in his body would interact with the new poison he had recently received. Since he hadn't died yet, they were able to live side by side. The only question was how long this could continue. At the same time, he does not have the strength to destroy the new poison in the same way that he used before. Hao Tian is still too weak for such tricks. Apparently, because of this stupid old man, the guy will never have a chance to start living like a normal person. Is his fate really that stupid? However, you need to look for the positive in everything, even though the old man is not trustworthy. In fact, this book may turn out to be very useful. It was written in it that there are 6 layers, and it also said that even the geniuses of the previous generation were unable to break through even to the 3rd. It seems that this secret technique is really very difficult to cultivate, and it requires a lot of experience. The 9 heavens technique is divided into 2 parts, one focusing on the use of elixirs and acupuncture, and the other on developing internal energy. However, at one point, a creator appeared who tried to subjugate this force. It seemed to him that the internal energy was limiting everything too much. Therefore, he changed the technique and called it True Qi. Its main advantage was internal energy, which has an inexhaustible supply. If Hao Tian continued like this, his strength would increase significantly, but most likely, in order to defeat that sect, he would need to break through to the 3rd layer. Then, a new world will literally open up before him, because the guy will have the opportunity to perfect the elixir of longevity and live up to 3,000 years. It was simply wonderful. Then the hero would be able to eat and drink deliciously for the rest of his life, because no one had ever managed to pull this off before. However, at the moment this was still a long way off. His capabilities were very far from ideal. He needed to train hard every day. The only plus was that there were still 20 years until the next competition between the clans, which should be enough time to study. Most likely, learning this technique will indeed become his main occupation for the next couple of years. Suddenly his phone rang. As it turned out, Chu Yaoyao had called him, and only now did Hao Tian realize that he had missed work again today because of all these events. When the guy picked up the phone, his boss immediately started yelling and scolding him, but he made excuses and said he had very important things to do. The vice president called him a fool, but his boss was willing to help him and would take the day off for him, but she asked him not to do it again. The hero promises that he will definitely improve, and as a token of gratitude for her help, he wants to invite the girl to dinner tomorrow evening. Chu Yaoyao was very surprised by this proposal. Did this guy really decide to invite her on a date to a restaurant? At some point, Hao Tian himself realized that he had gone a little too far, and whether he had enough funds to satisfy a young lady like her. If his boss ate some Western food and then drank a bottle of 200-year-old Lafite, his strategic reserve of 20,000 would simply disappear. The vice president suggests discussing this a little later, since the men who also want to invite her to dinner are already standing in a kilometer-long line. The hero was delighted. Perhaps he would get lucky now and he would keep the money for himself. The guy really was not worthy of such an incredible woman. However, to his great regret, Chu Yaoyao suddenly changed her mind. She was willing to go to dinner with him as an apology. At that moment, the hero realized that all was lost. Now he would definitely have to spend all his meager reserves on expensive wine. At this point, their conversation ended. Hao Tian hung up and was about to cry a little, but suddenly someone else called him. As it turned out, it was Song Ron Rong, and suddenly the guy had a small hope of survival. Perhaps his girlfriend was going to repay the debt. With an inspired face, he picked up the phone and asked her about it, but the girl could not pay yet. She was calling about something else. Suddenly, instead of a pleasant female voice, a rough male bass voice was heard on the line, calling the hero a red scarf. Hao Tian didn't even understand at first what they were talking about. He literally made up this organization on the fly. Was Song Ronrong really trying to play a trick on him? In fact, he didn't have time for such nonsense, so the hero says into the microphone that he needs to go, and now he will hang up. However, a male voice informs him that the girl is now his hostage, and she can even say hello to her dear friend. Only after this did the guy realize that someone had kidnapped his friend. But what did these villains want from him? Did they really want ransom money? The girl, in turn, asks her friend not to come anywhere. He should just call the police as soon as possible. When the bandit heard this, he became very angry at how this stupid girl could allow herself to behave like this. Now Hao Tian had no other choice. He tries to find out from the kidnappers what they want from him. The villain informs the hero that he must arrive at the address he will now receive on his phone within 30 minutes. But if he decides to take the police with him, Song Ronrong will die. The guy replied that he would be there at the appointed time, but if even one hair fell from his girlfriend's head, they would deeply regret it. At this point, their conversation ended. The gang leader threw his phone into Huang Mao's hands. An important guest would soon visit them. The villains were already fully prepared. There were a dozen of the most brutal and aggressive hooligans present in this warehouse. Song Ronrong was very afraid at this moment. Above all, she didn't want the guy to risk his life in an attempt to save her. The girl thought that he should never come here, but Hao Tian had already made up his mind and was heading to the specified address. At some point, Huang Mao approached the hostage and threatened to kill her. When they dealt with her friend, they would immediately kill the girl too. However, his assistant reminds him that the enemy is quite strong, and although they have a numerical advantage, there was still a risk of losing. The villain, in turn, didn't even want to listen to such nonsense. Their boss was with them, which meant that they could handle it in a few minutes. The gang leader ordered them to shut up immediately. They don't even know what they're talking about. There are people in their city that this bald gangster is afraid of. After this, he approached the girl and told her that he was not the kind of person who did evil for the sake of evil. He was able to distinguish between good and bad. And if her savior, nicknamed Red Scarf, really arrived here at the appointed time, he would never dare to harm Song Ronrong. But Huang Mao didn't agree with this, because it was because of her that he lost his beautiful face. The gang boss, in turn, didn't even want to listen to this nonsense, as if he himself wasn't ashamed to talk such nonsense. That being said, the bald gangster still looked pretty creepy. It was hard to tell what was really on his mind and what his real intentions were. It is quite possible that after the massacre of the Red Scarf, he will harm the girl. People like him always take advantage of their power. However, for now, he explained to his subordinate that he was beaten by another person, and Song Ronrong had nothing to do with it. Huang Mao still couldn't calm down. The bandit thought that his boss was going to take this girl as his prey. The boss is very sorry that these two fools have to go through all this, but he has no choice. He hopes for understanding on their part. After this, the man introduces himself. His name is Wang Tao. He wants to convince the hostage that she can call him her brother. After this whole situation, the girl can count on his protection. The words of a man like him carry a certain weight in their city. The bandit also apologizes to the hostage for the behavior of his subordinates. He will definitely make amends for his guilt in the future. Song Ronrong asks the man not to go so far. If he spares her friend, then she will definitely answer them later. However, this pervert had only one thing on his mind. He didn't need any money. The girl could only pay in one way. He also says that as a country that has its own laws, they have their own rules. The villain can save Hao Tian's life. However, before this brat had to come to him and explain everything that had happened, Wang Tao suddenly hit the hostage in the face with his palm. Song Ronrong was very angry about this. This idiot will definitely get what he deserves. And the gang leader is surprised that this girl is not afraid to talk to him in such a tone. She better not provoke a person like this bandit. If you spend some time with him, it will become clear what kind of character he has. Now he is just pretending to be better than he really is. Suddenly the doors to the warehouse swung open with a very loud sound. Everyone present was very surprised. Did this guy really show up? The hero arrived at the designated place much faster than expected, and it was clear from his face that he was determined to teach these scoundrels a lesson. Huang Mao immediately recognized this man. The bandit will not forget this face for the rest of his life. That situation a few weeks ago had deeply affected him. Hao Tian fulfilled all the conditions and came to the meeting alone, without the support of police officers. From the outside, it might seem like he's crazy. His girlfriend was very angry when she saw the guy. How was he smart enough to come here alone? And even without a weapon, these freaks are armed to the teeth. She also asked her friend to run away immediately, but Wang Tao claimed that this brat would never be able to leave here. The hero found himself in a very dangerous situation. 6 villains came out against him at once, and they all had bladed weapons with them. The leader calmly sat down in a chair and praised the guest for his courage. Not every man would have dared to come here in proud solitude. He even began to respect this guy a little. It seems he really has character, but at the same time this act is incredibly arrogant. In response to this, Hao Tian replied that he himself was well aware of his own strengths, and that this idiot had better worry about his hair. The other bandits couldn't believe their ears. Could this madman really have decided to make a joke at such a moment? Wang Tao was furious at what he heard. Apparently this brat really wants to die today. He even understands whose territory he is on now. However, the hero did not even want to answer this question, but simply turned to his friend and asked her not to worry, a little more, and they would both leave here. She also doesn't have to worry about money, because today his company has a special offer. He will deal with these scoundrels for free. Hao Tian notices his old friends. Those 2 losers were here too. How worthless were they to put on such a show here? The guy didn't even expect that by beating up these weaklings he accidentally damaged their brains. There's simply no other way to explain such behavior. Huang Mao told the red scarf to shut up immediately. If he leaves here today, it will only be in a coffin. The bandit swears that he will do it with his own hands. Hao Tian simply didn't listen to this chatter, but calmly turned his head towards Wang Tao and asked if he really had the courage to hit the girl. The leader advises him not to worry about it. Right now he has more serious problems. This fool needs to think about himself first. This answer was enough for the hero. Now he was sure that it was this bald villain who dared to harm Song Ronrong. Besides, the guy couldn't understand how such worthless people as these bandits managed to gain a foothold in such a good city as Fuyang. These ridiculous fools couldn't even be called a criminal group. Comparing them to the Yakuza or the Italian Mafia was simply ridiculous. Wang Tao couldn't understand what was wrong with this brat. How could a person in his position remain so confident? His face looked too calm. At first glance, it may seem that he is just a poor and gloomy boy, who most likely does not have anyone who would stand up for him. At this moment, one of the bandits got tired of just standing there and rushed at the hero with a bat. Hao Tian, in his usual manner, didn't even try to dodge such a slow and weak attack, but simply stood in his place. And at some point, with one precise and powerful kick, he knocked out the villain. The attack was very powerful, and now this bandit will hardly be able to fight any further. Huang Mao watched from the side and couldn't even understand what had happened. The man's movements were so fast that everything that was happening looked like some kind of movie. Now it became clear to everyone that this was an unusual person in front of them. This guy was at the very least a professional fighter and an expert in martial arts. But in reality, it didn't matter at all. Right now he was leaving this world. Wang Tao ordered everyone to immediately rush to attack. All these bandits are obliged to fight to the end and show their best, while the hero is waiting for the best moment for a successful counterattack. Huang Mao was very happy when he watched what was happening. His boss was very angry. Now this fool will pay with blood for everything he did. However, Hao Tian definitely didn't intend to die in this place. It wasn't difficult for him to instantly neutralize the 2 attackers. The 2 bandits immediately dropped their bats and flew several meters to the side, and suddenly another villain jumped out at the guy. The conversation with him was also short. With one precise punch, the hero managed to knock him out. After that, Hao Tian jumped high into the air. He was right above the other 2 scoundrels. In fact, they didn't even have a chance to dodge. After all, the hero's movements were much faster than those of an ordinary person, thanks to which he was able to easily knock out one enemy after another. In the end, after just a few minutes, all the bandits were defeated. Wang Tao couldn't believe his eyes. Did such people really exist? This guy managed to defeat all of his charges without even getting a scratch, something that rarely happens even in movies. Song Ronrong was no less surprised. She certainly understood that her friend had certain abilities, But this was something truly incredible. And Huang Mao, in turn, abruptly changed his opinion of the hero. Now the last thing he wanted was to quarrel with such a person. So he suddenly fell to his knees and begged for mercy. In fact, he was just a fool who interfered in my business. This will not happen again. Hao Tian is once again surprised at how worthless a person can be. This weakling's time has simply not come yet. He will definitely deal with him, but he will do it a little later. It's just that right now he has more important things to do. However, the fair-haired bandit didn't even listen to him. This weakling was so scared that he simply bowed all the time and begged for mercy. And the assistant simply asked to look at everything with sober eyes, because this time he really had nothing to do with it, and besides, it was not his idea. Wang Tao praised the hero. This man really had unique abilities. The man had never seen anything like this before. The guy thought that the leader was probably not quite right in the head either, because any normal person would have immediately run away after seeing what he saw. However, the bald gangster looked quite calm and continued to speak. He has been in this business for many years, but this is something new. Hao Tian was sure that this villain would just take a gun out of his pocket now. He should do it at least a little faster. Everything turned out exactly as the guy expected. But why is he acting so self-confident? Because this weapon is definitely real. For some reason, Wang Tao was very scared when he saw the gun. Could this really be the first criminal in the world who is afraid of firearms? But everything turned out to be a little simpler. This idiot once again switched sides and now suggested that the hero get on his knees as quickly as possible. This behavior had already infuriated even his boss, so he hit the fair-haired bandit in the face with all his strength. How can a weakling like him still manage to behave like this? If this jerk says another word, he'll get a bullet in his head. Hao Tian turned to the gang leader and asked, "He is holding a Glock 17 in his hands right now, but don't tell me that the bald gangster loaded domestic bullets into him. After all, they could explode." Wang Tao was even more surprised by such behavior. The guy did not panic even at the sight of a firearm, but there was no turning back. So the man pointed the barrel of his pistol straight at the hero's forehead. Does he really think his fists can outpace a bullet? The gang leader respects this man as a man. If he admits his mistakes, he can count on a pardon, but otherwise his life will end here. Hao Tian even reacted calmly to this. In fact, this bald gangster continues to stand here for only one reason. Wang Tao couldn't understand what this madman was talking about now. Could it really be that even the weapon pointed straight at his head was useless? The guy explains that if the bandit had fired his gun, he would already be dead, but he is just an ordinary weakling who is afraid to take a step. The gang leader insisted on his own and assured that he was not at all afraid to pull that damn trigger, and now he was giving this fool his last chance. At that moment, the hero saw the right moment and with one swift movement snatched the pistol from Wang Tao's hands. Now the bald gangster was in big trouble because his own gun was pointed at him, and the situation took a completely unexpected turn. Hao Tian asked the man how much he paid for this piece of junk, which he called a gun, as it turned out the weapon cost 50,000. Suddenly the guy hit the bandit on the head. Did this fool really pay that much money for such trash? How could you not notice that this is actually a poorly made fake? The font on this pistol was so crooked that the weapon would hardly fire even once. At this moment, Wang Tao was completely at a loss and fell to his knees. In his entire life, he had never found himself in such humiliating circumstances. The hero tried to reload the pistol, but the thing just fell apart into tiny pieces. How could a bandit have such a poor understanding of weapons? The gangster immediately began to make excuses and ask for forgiveness, but Hao Tian was not going to believe the words of such a person. He had to show sincerity. Suddenly, Wang Tao took out a knife from his pocket and stabbed the leg with all his might, thus trying to prove his determination. After this, the gangster asked the guy whether he should now believe his words. After all, it was a rather painful procedure. However, Hao Tian was not at all impressed by this performance. His actions were much worse than what he was doing to himself now. The bandit couldn't think of anything better to do than to do the same with his other leg. Now the hero would definitely believe him. But everything turned out to be completely different. The guy believed that there was still not enough sincerity in the bandit's actions. Did he really not have a drop of imagination? Unfortunately, Wang Tao no longer has legs to pierce with a knife, so he just asks for forgiveness again. And besides, he has a mother and a wife to take care of. The gangster promises that if he offends anyone again, he can be punished in any way Hao Tian wishes, and he will not even complain. And after this, the bandit turns to the girl and tries to press on her pity, because he was very kind to her, and continued to protect her even in the most difficult moments. Song Ranrong is too kind a person, so she feels that this man has already suffered enough. She thinks that he will really change his behavior. In the end, the hero decides to let Wang Tao go, but only because he has people who need his help. By the way, Huang Mao's assistant, who was with him that evening a few weeks ago, could also be free. The bandit thanked the guy for such generosity. However, there was one more point that Hao Tian wanted to discuss. In fact, when he spoke of sincerity, he meant something else. The gangster thought that this kid was starting to blackmail and threaten him again, since he had already humiliated himself in front of him as much as he could. But as it turned out, the guy meant moral compensation, because on the way here he spent quite a lot of money on a taxi, and he also wanted to eat. Wang Tao seemed to be even glad to hear it. The hero was indeed right. He should just tell him the amount, and he would reimburse everything. Hao Tian is actually a frugal person, so he only needs a little money. If the bandit gives him 1 million, everything will be settled. The gangster had never heard anyone call 1 million a small sum. Would he really have to pay that much? However, there was no other way out. It was better to part with a lot of money than with his own life. He promised to transfer the money tomorrow. Now everything was finally okay, and the hero could free his girlfriend from the ropes. Now they could calmly go home. But as soon as the friends headed towards the warehouse exit, Wang Tao suddenly addressed them and asked the guys to wait a little. As it turned out, the man wanted to give Hao Tian his business card, so if he needed anything in the future, he could call the gangster at any time. The guy happily took the phone number and called the bandit a pretty smart person, and also thanked the man for his sincerity. But that wasn't all. The gang leader also gave the hero the keys to his car, so it would be more comfortable for him to get back home. In fact, the man himself would have been happy to give them a ride, but due to the wounds on his legs, he couldn't do it. Hao Tian even began to consider this bandit the best in the whole city. Besides, Wang Tao knew a lot about good cars. This car was not only very comfortable inside, but also remained quite fast. The girl thanked her friend for saving her once again. If it weren't for his help, everything could have ended much worse. The hero asks her not to worry about this. After all, she was a client of his company, so Hao Tian is obliged to do everything to protect Song Ranrong. Moreover, she is the daughter of his good friend. He would not be able to live peacefully if something bad happened to his girlfriend. The girl found it funny that the guy wasn't going to take money from her for today. Of course, he didn't need it. He had just blackmailed a bandit for a whole million. However, Hao Tian doesn't think it was blackmail. It's called compensation for moral damages. She can't even imagine how nervous he was. Song Ranrong was very embarrassed when she heard this. Was her friend really that worried about her safety? He really cares about her. But at some point the girl drives her thoughts away. What is she even thinking about, by the way? This man is friends with her father. They can't be together in any way. However, it is quite difficult to deceive feelings. So the beauty tried to admire her savior as discreetly as possible. After all, the hero looked really cool today, like a character from a movie shown on TV. Song Ranrong told her friend this directly. She really thinks he is amazing. He fights like a real master. However, the guy thinks that this is all absolute nonsense. There is nothing special about him. Hao Tian is used to considering himself absolutely ordinary. However, his friend insists on her own. After all, he managed to single-handedly defeat so many bandits. Is every person really capable of this? The girl suggests that they change their relationship a little and wants to call him brother, but the hero is already used to being called by his first name. Song Ranrong in turn was offended by him. Was it really that difficult to do, since their age difference was only a few years? Hao Tian reminds her that she and her father are old friends. It would be wrong if they started calling each other brother and sister. At that moment, the girl's expression suddenly changed. Most likely, she felt a strong coldness in her friend's response. After some time, they finally reached the house where Song Ranrong lived, and the hero decided to follow his girlfriend to the very end. At the moment when the girl was almost at the entrance, she suddenly told the guy that during their conversation, she had a strange feeling. Hao Tian didn't understand what she was talking about at all. In fact, he was quite bad at such subtle matters. The beauty tried to explain to him that this feeling was like a high wall in his heart, because at first glance the hero was very sweet and caring. However, as soon as the girl makes an attempt to get closer to him, he immediately pushes her away in every possible way. It is because of this that one gets the impression that this person is behind a large, cold wall that cannot be overcome. Hao Tian didn't even know what to say to this. His girlfriend was saying too complicated things. He didn't even manage to finish elementary school. It seems that Song Ranrong was just overexcited today and started talking nonsense. She should go home and get some rest. In the end, the friend says that since childhood, she envied children who had older brothers, which is why she really wanted to have such a person. She didn't mean anything else, and she also really liked the hero's driving style. His skills were even better than those of many drivers. And there's no need to even mention his martial arts skills. The guy was so good that the first question that arose was why he didn't want to find a better job. Hao Tian replied that actually cleaning dirty things made him feel some pleasure, and wasn't it bad to work as a cleaner? However, the girl was quite perceptive. Her friend did not need to lie. She was sure that he had to go through a lot in his life. That's why the guy always has such a sad face and looks tired. His mind and body were very exhausted. This needs to be corrected as soon as possible. In response, the hero claims that she is behaving like a little girl and is embellishing everything too much, since he doesn't even have a driver's license. In fact, she definitely shouldn't worry about him. Isn't she tired today herself? She needs to go inside and sleep right now. Song Ronrong still insisted, in any case. She knew what was in Hao Tian's heart right now, so he should think it over as best he could. The hero replies that he will definitely do exactly as his friend told him, and after that he leaves. She should also hurry. The girl is sure that this man has gone through many things that she cannot even imagine. His fate is clearly very difficult. Although the guy didn't want to take Song Ronrong's words seriously, she really was too perceptive, and sad thoughts naturally arose in his head. Suddenly the hero notices that the sunroof is open in the car, and only now does it dawn on him why it was quite cold inside. Hao Tian suddenly thought that there were a lot of beautiful stars in the sky today, and the moon looked very majestic and seemed to calm him down. The guy had already forgotten the last time he simply looked at the night sky and admired the most ordinary things. Since he will soon have a lot of money, the hero decides to withdraw some money in honor of this and treat himself to something tasty. As soon as he took the money from the ATM, he noticed that there was a girl standing next to him. Was she really going to rob him? This stranger looked too young to be a pickpocket. Would she dare to act at all, or would she continue to stand there? The girl looked like an ordinary student at a local university. So what made her go down such a bad path? Hao Tian was just curious about how this beauty was going to take his money. At first glance, she didn't look dangerous. At some point, the beauty decides to act and jumps out right in front of the guy. As it turns out, she had no intention of robbing anyone. But the hero didn't immediately understand this. At first, it seemed to him that this was just her first robbery. This girl looked very unprofessional. The stranger immediately asked Hao Tian how much money he had just put in his pocket. Although she looked harmless, the question turned out to be quite frank. The guy thought the same and answered whether the beauty thought such a question was too harsh, but the student actually wanted to provide her services. The hero did not immediately understand what was being discussed. The stranger, with an embarrassed look, hinted that she could make him happy and satisfied. After this, Hao Tian finally figured out what the girl was talking about and hurried away. He was not interested in such services. She should look for someone else. However, to his great surprise, the student did not want to let him go and asked him to stop. Apparently, she really urgently needed money. Then the stranger tries to convince the guy that she is asking for very little and that he has the opportunity to do it for just a few thousand. Hao Tian wasn't interested in it anyway, and it had nothing to do with money. He just never liked using such services. Suddenly, the girl starts crying and begs the hero to agree. She is ready to do it for only 20,000. When the hero heard this, he was very surprised. Did this student really take him for a rich kid? For that kind of money, he could find two of them right now. As it turned out, this unfortunate girl had never been with a man before, but she was already an adult, and in fact, she was still studying at university. To prove this, she had her student ID card with her. But what prompted this stranger to take such a step for the sake of a few thousand? Hao Tian was quite tired today and didn't want to deal with it, but simply advised the girl to forget about it and go home to rest. After all, her mother might be very worried about her now, so she shouldn't do such stupid things. She's still too young. Suddenly, the stranger began to cry even harder, and at the same time, she began to say that her mother was still in the hospital in serious condition. Apparently, she had no choice, and she lowered the price to 15,000. At this moment, the girl was completely confused and asked herself what she was doing. The guy notices this and tries to understand what is wrong with this stranger, whether she is really doing this against her will. At some point, her tear-stained face brought back old memories in his head, because he had once looked exactly the same. He was very familiar with that feeling of absolute helplessness, when you are unable to influence the situation and still maintain your dignity. Since the student had really made such a decision, she should go get him right now. They couldn't do it on the street. Right now, they will go to the nearest hotel to rent a room there. Such a place should be suitable. The beauty entered the room and timidly sat down on the bed. From her behavior, you could immediately understand that she absolutely did not want to do this. A few minutes later, Hao Tian returned to her with money in his hands. It took him a few minutes to withdraw the full amount. It turned out to be quite cold outside, so he asked the girl to pour him a glass of warm water to warm up. Suddenly, the student asked her client to state his name. After all, she wanted to get to know this person at least a little better. However, the hero did not want to do this. Why did she need this information after all? Her work has nothing to do with it. However, the beauty continued to stand her ground. Was it really that difficult? By the way, this was very important in her understanding. In fact, Hao Tian just wanted to see the girl's reaction. He easily stated his name, age, and position in the company. At first, the student didn't even believe that this man really worked as a cleaner. Did they really get paid that much these days? However, the beauty believed that it didn't matter what job a person had, only what moral qualities were instilled in him. After this, the guy recommends that she take a shower and freshen up, where she will finally be able to decide whether she really wants this. The girl went to the bathroom and thought that this man was very different from all men. There was definitely something special about him. After all, most of the male representatives constantly looked at her with eyes full of lust. She had to deal with this many times. However, Hao Tian behaved very decently even in this situation. Could he really be doing this just to help her in a difficult situation? At the same time, some things in his words still left questions about how he, being a cleaner, could own such huge reserves of money. But all of this didn't really matter. Now the girl just needed to play her role. Only then would she have the opportunity to help her mother. After some time, the student came out of the shower and informed her client that she was finished, with only a towel remaining on her. The guy looked at her and again remembered the past. The beauty had the same lost face as he had many years ago. This made him sad. Suddenly, he took a sheet from the bed and covered his friend with it. Had he really changed his mind and was now just going to go somewhere on his own business? The stranger thought exactly this and asked him to stop, because if she didn't earn money today, then everything would be lost. In fact, the hero is simply not in the mood today, but he always keeps his promises, so the girl will receive the full amount. However, first of all, she needs to state the reason for such an act. Only in this case can she count on his money. When the beauty heard this demand, she was silent for a few seconds and then tried to clarify what was being discussed. Hao Tian first needs to understand why such a pretty girl would suddenly decide to start selling herself. There definitely needs to be a good reason for that. You could tell from the stranger's face that she didn't want to talk about it at all, but since it came down to it, she could explain everything. It turned out that her mother was seriously ill and needed an operation. If the beauty could not collect the money by tomorrow morning, the woman would be in danger. The guy never expected to hear this, but would 20,000 be able to completely resolve this issue and save his mother from illness? In response, the girl shook her head. The hero couldn't understand what this fool was going to do next. Did she really want to collect such a sum by selling herself? The beauty made it clear that she was ready to do absolutely any work. If only her dear relative would survive, she was ready to do everything for this. At this moment, Hao Tian came up with an idea that would solve the problem of medical bills. The guy is ready to give 200,000 for 2 years in advance, in exchange for which the girl will cook for him whenever needed. However, it is worth remembering that this is not just a gift, but rather a loan, so she will have to pay the entire amount a little later. When the beauty heard this, she burst into tears. Could this man really be so kind? She was very lucky today. At the same time, the hero believed that this was not entirely true, since he was literally hiring her for a job for which she would not receive any money at all. Within a few minutes, they were ready to sign the contract, according to which the stranger would receive the full amount within 3 days. At some point, the girl asked if this was Hao Tian's wife's money, and in response, she heard that she should talk less and hurry up. Without thinking twice, the beauty signs her name with a pencil. In fact, this was the only chance to help her relative. Now that everything was ready, the guy could finally go home and rest a little. This day had really exhausted him. Before leaving, he reminded his new friend that she should not do such stupid things again. Otherwise, her mother would be upset to find out about it. The girl, in turn, suggested that Hao Tian stay here, since it was already late. Apparently, she was very grateful to him. The hero asked not to set such prices here, because he is still a man, and if he acts in such a way, he will simply stop respecting himself. After this, the guy goes about his business, and his new girlfriend is left alone. Fortunately, this room has already been paid for. Therefore, the beauty could calmly stay here for the night. Tears once again appeared on her face. Today, she really met a wonderful person. While Hao Tian was walking home, he wondered if he had been hasty with his decision. He had literally become the sponsor of a student he had met a couple of hours earlier. Because of these obsessive thoughts, he was unable to get a good night's sleep, so the hero came to work with no energy at all. Although he tried very hard to have a good rest, he didn't succeed at all, and it looks like he'll have to work anyhow now. However, this day was still one of the best in his life, because right now Wang Tao transferred a whole 1.5 million into his account. As it turned out, the man managed to find an additional 500,000. It looks like this bandit really has a very good head. It is quite possible that this person could be used in the future. After all, he has good connections throughout the city. As soon as the elevator doors opened in front of Hao Tian, he immediately noticed that his old friend was standing in front of him in very high heels. It was Lin Yumu. The hero turned to her and remarked that it was a huge coincidence to meet her again. Would they really have to go to the top floor together? The company president didn't even notice the guy right away. She was still very angry with him, but tried to hide it. The girl decided to simply turn away and ignore this cleaner. In her opinion, he wasn't even worthy of talking to her. At some point, Hao Tian decides to remind his boss about that photo, since he can still post it on the forum at any time. Lin Yumu was very angry when she heard this. If this fool really did this, he would definitely regret it. She also called the guy a scumbag and a shameless person. The hero absolutely did not agree with this. Most likely he again wanted to tease his boss a little. So he came closer to her and claimed that she simply didn't know him well enough. Because in reality, he was much worse. After all, Hao Tian is not just a scoundrel and shameless, but a real villain and a completely shameless man who does whatever he wants. The company director was at a loss at this point. This cleaner was behaving completely arrogantly. Was she really going to lose to him now? The girl couldn't just remain silent, so she ordered the hero to shut up. She had never met such obscene and arrogant people in her entire life. Now Hao Tian had the opportunity to hint to his boss that the girl had actually fallen in love with him and was trying to attract his attention in this way. Lin Yumu was furious at these words. Why on earth would she fall in love with a beggar like this cleaner? At that moment, she wanted to kill the fool. At that moment, the elevator finally reached the right floor and the doors opened. The girl immediately headed for the exit. More than anything in the world, she wanted to get away as far as possible. Now the company president has even more reasons for revenge. Lin Yumu will definitely make this employee answer fully for his actions. Her sister was watching this whole performance in the elevator. The situation became quite tense. What happened between them in the end? Apparently, Hao Tian had really done something terrible, and that was why Lin Yumu was so upset with him. Suddenly, her older sister runs into her office. She urgently needs to find out how things are going with the janitor's punishment. As it turns out, Chu Yaoyao is a bit short on time right now. In fact, the vice president was more interested in another question. Why had her eldest not come to work for several days, and had she really gotten a boyfriend? Lin Yumu didn't have a boyfriend, but despite this, it was quite possible that the girl would get married soon. Had she really been lying to her sister all these years? It turned out that they had promised each other as children that they would only get married at the same time, and the company president just wanted to discuss this. Her younger sister's first guess was that it was again because of the man named Xiaolei. It was already a very long story. Lin Yumu's father was going to marry her off to this man, but she didn't want that at all, so she and her sister came up with a plan. The friends found a pregnant woman who, in front of Xiaolei's parents and many of his friends, accused him of having the child. The company president thought this had gone too far, but Chu Yaoyao insisted that they had done the right thing, as the man was a complete and utter scumbag. The vice president doesn't understand what's wrong with their father if he's trying to marry off his beloved daughter to a scumbag like Xiaolei. After all, this man was very rich and influential, most likely the future heir to the position of president of a large company. Besides, this man is quite handsome and has good manners, of course. The older generation likes people like him. Her younger sister still considered her future groom to be an ordinary hypocrite. She knew perfectly well what kind of man this man really was. Most likely, all this is happening because their father is seriously ill and dying. The doctor said that he has very little time left. Chu Yaoyao didn't even know that the situation was so serious, so that explains a lot. But in any case, the situation is too unfair. Suddenly, the vice president has a great idea. How about appearing in front of the family with a new guy? Lin Yumu realized that her sister had once again come up with some stupid plan. What was it this time? But now it was just a great idea. If the president of the company finds himself a guy, then this will completely correct the situation and satisfy everyone. However, how could an ice goddess find a partner so quickly? It wasn't a thing. Her younger sister couldn't believe that she was so stupid. After all, it is possible to find a fake guy. Lin Yumu, in turn, thought that this was complete nonsense. Everything, as usual, would not go according to plan. Chu Yao Yao decides to take the initiative. It won't be easy, but she will still be able to find a suitable person she can trust. Her eldest finally agrees. Now she needs to go and sort out the accumulated matters. After all, she hasn't shown up for work for several days. Immediately after this, the vice president began to think about which of her acquaintances would best suit her role as a fake boyfriend. For some reason, whenever the girl thought about this, the image of Hao Tian constantly popped into her head. But why him in particular? It will be easy to persuade him, because a simple cleaner really needs money, but if the ice goddess finds out that she will have to pretend to be this man's girlfriend, she will be seriously angry. Meanwhile, the guy's phone rang. It turned out to be his good friend, but he had completely forgotten that he had invited her to dinner. The hero calmly picked up the phone and greeted the girl, asking if everything was okay with her. She replied that of course not, because he had forgotten about their meeting. Hao Tian tried to pretend that he had accidentally forgotten about it, but now was not the time. He needed to go down to the parking lot right now. The guy thought that right now they would go to a restaurant. What bad luck! He just lost a lot of money yesterday, and today he would be bankrupt again. A few minutes later, the hero was already in the underground parking lot. His girlfriend's car was very easy to find. The bright color stood out very much. Chu Yao Yao was already waiting for him inside. Since they had agreed to have lunch together, she should name the restaurant they would go to now. The vice president recalled that during their first conversation, she had chosen an expensive French restaurant, which was, in fact, incredibly wasteful. At the same time, Hao Tian noticed that the girl's behavior seemed very strange. Usually, she behaved much more calmly. Therefore, he decides to ask directly what happened to his friend. She clearly has something on her mind. There is no point in her hiding secrets from him. Chu Yao Yao finally makes up her mind and asks her friend to do her one small favor, and she will definitely thank him for the service. The guy was immediately interested in the offer. Money would never hurt him, and he wasn't afraid of work. However, the vice president was hesitant to explain the essence of her plan. It still seemed too strange to her. If she really brings this man to her sister, then she will simply spit in his face. This needs to be thought through in more detail. Hao Tin noticed that the girl was acting even more strangely. Was it really such a big secret what happened in the end? When they finally pulled up to the restaurant, the guy hesitated for a while to even go inside. The vice president asked him to hurry up. The inside of the restaurant looked incredibly luxurious. They say that they cook the best steaks in the city here. The place is definitely very expensive. The waiter's attention was immediately drawn to this couple. The girl looked incredibly beautiful, while her companion looked like someone who would never be able to pay the bill at this establishment. Chu Yao Yao asked her friend how he liked the atmosphere here, and the hero thought it was just a place to eat. However, the vice president did not agree with this. After all, this was her first time dining alone with a man, and it was important for her to choose a worthy establishment. After this, the girl calls the waiter and makes an order, which includes 2 steaks, a fruit salad, and a bottle of very expensive French wine. The beauty understood that when her companion found out the cost of the bottle of alcohol, he would be very upset. She still wanted to teach him a lesson for that incident in the hospital. Hao Tian, in response to this, decides to joke and says that this wine must cost several hundred, and the whole dinner will cost him several thousand. After all, he can afford it. Chu Yao Yao thought that this man was incredibly stupid. Did he really think that such wine could only cost a few hundred? Meanwhile, the waiter had already brought their order. The guy thought that his salary as a cleaner would be enough to pay for the entire lunch. The girl eventually assumed that he would spend all the money he took from her in the hospital anyway. The hero continued to play his role and asked the restaurant worker how much this alcohol cost. As it turned out, its cost was 21,000. Hao Tian thinks it's too expensive, and he thinks a regular dry wine from the supermarket for $50 would be much better. The vice president tried to defuse the situation and explained to the waiter that the man was just a jokester. But what the hell was he up to? She asked him about it directly. Because this wine is one of the best in the world. And as it turned out, the hero was well versed in this matter. Chu Yao Yao was curious about what an ordinary cleaner could know about elite alcohol. He should tell him everything he knew. In fact, the guy was just pretending. All his knowledge was limited to one case when he emptied the entire collection of a rich grandfather. The hero is an ordinary person. His job is simply to sweep the floor. Of course, he is not given the ability to understand all the subtleties of expensive wine, but they specifically write about it, that it consists of a mixture of pine cones and violets. And when you consume it, it's difficult to even taste jasmine, let alone pine cones and violets. As it turns out, the hero has an incredibly sensitive sense of smell. He can find a person in a crowd just by their scent. The vice president wanted to check this. For this, he needs to determine who her sister is. The scent of this girl is right now on her friend's clothes. The guy easily determined that her relative was the same rude woman he had met in the elevator a couple of days ago. Chu Yao Yao was simply amazed. Since they were talking about this, she wanted to know what the hero did to anger Lin Yumu so much. Hao Tian explained that nothing special actually happened, and then described in detail the situation with the indecent video in the office. The girl thought that this man was crazy. How dare he do this to her sister? He just has the character of the devil. The guy, in turn, decided that it was time for them to go. Since they had already finished their meal, his companion should go to the car, and he would be there in 5 minutes. The vice president couldn't understand why they wouldn't go together. It turned out the guy had a plan, and she was too slow for it. It consisted of running away from this establishment and not paying the bill. She had nothing to worry about. The hero could do everything himself. Chu Yao Yao didn't want to do this. Didn't he have the money she gave him a few days ago? But this action had a basis. Hao Tian claimed that this expensive wine was actually a cheap fake, but his companion did not think that this was a reason to be shy. But at some point, it seemed like a rather exciting activity to her. She had lived her whole life according to strict rules, and now there was an opportunity to break them. Finally, the vice president announces that he will be waiting impatiently for his friend in the car, and the hero asks the waiter for 2 more steaks. At that moment, he remembered the words that his adoptive father had told him long ago. The devil really does live in every person. A few minutes later, the guy managed to stuff himself with 2 more huge dishes. Now he was really full. Immediately after this, a waiter approached him and asked if the dear guest would finally like to pay the bill. However, as soon as the man finished his sentence, Hao Tian suddenly simply disappeared from his place, and the worker immediately sounded the alarm. And he ordered the guards to immediately seize this villain. He is trying to escape without paying for the order. Chu Yao Yao had been waiting for him in the car for several minutes already. What was that idiot doing there for so long? Did he really want to eat for free that much? At some point, the guy finally runs out and heads straight to the car. Now he and the girl need to get out of here as quickly as possible. Luckily, her car was very fast, so they successfully managed to escape from the crime scene. The waiter could only watch them go. The vice president really left very quickly, because if anyone caught her in such a situation, it would completely destroy her reputation. To avoid suspicion, the hero must get out of the car somewhere here. The girl was very worried about this issue, and it was important to her. Her friend, in turn, asks her to give him a ride at least to the city, but his girlfriend recently gave him quite a lot of money. Is he really so greedy that he can't call a taxi? Chu Yao Yao simply leaves and tells her friend not to be late for work tomorrow. She is already tired of constantly arranging his days off. In fact, Hao Tian didn't mind spending a little money on a taxi. The problem was that it was incredibly difficult to hail a car in such a place. So the guy decides to just take a little walk, even though it will take more time, but at least he will have the opportunity to breathe some fresh air. Suddenly he notices a bright light behind him, and it instantly dawns on him that a car is driving towards him at high speed right now. The hero only had time to look back and think about who it could be and whether he had any new enemies. Unfortunately, he was unable to jump away, and the car crashed right into him at high speed. He did not expect such a turn of events at all. By an incredible coincidence, Lin Yumu was driving, and the girl immediately got out of the car and tried to help the pedestrian. Hao Tian wasn't actually hurt at all. He was more surprised that she was the one who knocked him down. With her, there really wasn't a need for enemies. The company president looked very worried and tried hard to ask the injured man how he was feeling. The girl was quite confused and at first couldn't understand what to do, especially at that moment her phone's battery was dead. The guy watched all this from the side and was surprised at how this beauty managed to act so slowly. After all, she had just hit a person. It is only at this moment that it dawns on him that Lin Yumu is the CEO of the company where he works as a cleaner. And this meant that he had an excellent opportunity for another extortion. This situation could be turned to his advantage. Therefore, the hero decides to raise his hand from the asphalt. The company president, in turn, was very happy that the pedestrian was alive. However, after just a few seconds, her facial expression completely changed. Could it really be that same guy? Lin Yumu came closer to him and asked for forgiveness. She did it completely by accident, and now she needed a phone to call an ambulance. Hao Tian assumed that his mobile phone might have been broken, and he also hoped that his boss didn't intend to take revenge in this way. The beauty's face immediately showed that she was telling the truth. Now, more than anything in the world, she wanted to help the victim. The hero, in turn, tried to pretend to be completely disabled. His life was incredibly difficult. In his youth, he never knew love. The girl became even more upset and began to blame herself even more diligently. Even though she didn't like this cleaner, he was still a human being. The guy pretended that he could die at any second, so Lin Yumu had to fulfill one small request of his. The beauty was so excited at this moment that she was ready to do anything. The victim only needed to clarify what exactly. But the moment a seemingly dying pedestrian asked her to transfer some money to his bank account, she suddenly had second thoughts. Hao Tian continued to suffer. He had been poor for several decades, so before his death he wanted to be rich for at least a few minutes. If this does not happen, then the hero will be ashamed to meet his parents in the next world. This idea could really seem very sad. When Lin Yumu heard about her parents, she could no longer resist. This performance touched her so much that she was ready to fulfill any request. So the girl asks for his credit card number. She will transfer the money right now, and the hero simply gave her his phone. All the information is on it. The company president was thinking at that moment how poor this man must have been in his past life, that he had such a great obsession with money even before his death. At that very moment, a group of unknown men were passing by them. They were constantly talking about some story and arguing whether it was true or not. There were quite a lot of them, and they looked quite intimidating. The gang was heading straight towards the girl, but what was already on their minds? The chief turned to the beauty and asked him to allow her to introduce herself. His name is Qian, and all these people around him are his biker friends. Lin Yumu couldn't believe that such people actually existed. They could clearly see that the man had been in an accident, but they didn't even try to help. At this time, the hero was thinking about how to get out of this strange situation, and then suddenly some strange people appeared, but they didn't create any problems. The main biker couldn't understand how this pretty girl managed to find out in a split second whether he had a conscience or not, especially since the pedestrian most likely couldn't be saved. Now she better worry about herself, because if she doesn't do everything they tell her right now, then the gang will act as witnesses in court. At that moment, the girl started to worry. Today had been a really bad evening for her. First, she had an accident, and now these jerks. But she tried to stay calm and threatened these perverts that if they even touched her with a finger, they would regret what they said today. The bully wasn't at all scared by these threats, but only came closer. This girl is trying to pretend to be brave and daring, but it won't work on him. And in general, she was very lucky that the man had a very kind character. If it had been someone else, he would hardly have behaved so politely. At this point, the company president finally loses his temper and hits the bastard in the face with all his might. This bastard is getting away with too much. From the look on the bully's face, it was clear that at that moment he was furious. If he didn't get what he wanted today, he wouldn't be able to consider himself a man from now on. Therefore, he considers this a matter of his own dignity and immediately rushes towards Lin Yumu. The scoundrel is determined. However, the beauty was not going to just stand there and immediately responded with a strong blow right between the legs. At that moment, the bully squealed like a pig, and the hero heard it, and even he became interested in looking at it, so he had to turn over onto his other side. The main biker couldn't understand how the girl dared to do such a thing. He orders his men to immediately bring her closer. The rest of the hooligans immediately began to carry out this order, their faces looking quite crazy. These fools were acting incredibly arrogant. Could there really still be people in this city who dared to touch the Ling family? Suddenly, all the bikers stopped abruptly. Could this girl really belong to that very family? Hao Tian was surprised when he watched this scene. Apparently, her boss really was not an ordinary young lady. Chai knew perfectly well what all this meant. But did this beauty really think that if her family had a ton of money, then she could do whatever she wanted? As it turns out, this bastard belongs to a political family, and at all times, businessmen have been afraid of officials. Lin Yumu knew what this idiot was talking about, but she couldn't understand how such a sensible family could have such an idiot. At some point, the ice goddess apologizes to the hero. Apparently, she won't be able to save him today. Unfortunately, she won't even be able to protect herself. Was she really going to have to become a hostage to the situation now? But it seemed like there was no other choice. The circumstances had gone too far. Therefore, the beauty simply closes her eyes and is going to endure it all. If only it would pass as quickly as possible. Suddenly, as soon as one of the bikers approached the girl, his face met the guy's hard boot. He simply could not lie there and do nothing. His boss opened her eyes abruptly and couldn't comprehend what she was seeing with her own eyes. After all, she had just hit this man at full speed. And now he was standing on his feet as if nothing had happened. And he was also finding the strength to fight. How could this even happen? But in reality, she shouldn't think about this now. First of all, she needs to take care of her own safety. At the same time, Hao Tian swears on his own life that today, not one of these perverts will dare to even touch her with a finger. He also pretends that he has no idea where he is now. He asks Lin Yumu about it. The guy seems to have lost his memory. The beauty couldn't believe that the hero didn't recognize her at all. After all, they had met several weeks ago and had a rather specific relationship. It was clear from the guy's face that he had no idea what this girl was talking about. Did he really have amnesia? Hao Tian assumed that this stranger was most likely mistaken because he had spent his entire life collecting herbs on Mount Wudong and had only just come down from the mountain. He was also curious as to why these people in front of them were dressed so strangely and whether they could belong to that very demon sect. After all, these scoundrels dared to rob a woman. Today he was destined to act on behalf of heaven. Evil will be punished and good will triumph. The company director became more and more surprised with each of his phrases. Could this guy really have damaged his brain so badly? One of the bikers asked his leader if this weirdo could be some kind of hidden cultivator. Maybe they should be more careful. However, in response, he simply hit him in the face with his palm. This fool should return to reality right now. What danger could there be? The hero once again asks the beauty not to worry. In the Tang dynasty, such evil people will never be allowed to do evil. Now you just need to wait here a little, and he will go right now and take care of all these scoundrels so that the girl is safe. There was definitely something wrong with Hao Tian. At the very least, his speech had become very polite. Could it be that he had just died and then become possessed by some priest? Kyan wanted to deal with this idiot as soon as possible and ordered his men to act immediately. They needed to finish off their enemy. At this time, the guy stood calmly in place and with a face full of confidence suggested to the hooligans to approach one by one. Now there would be a glorious fight. Oddly enough, the lead biker wanted to strike first. The man assumed that he could knock out this weirdo with one blow. However, he didn't succeed. The hero easily dodged his left-hand strike and then broke his elbow on a counterattack. And then he lunged with all his might, causing Chen to fall first to his knees and a few seconds later, onto his back. Hao Tian also managed to deal with almost all the hooligans after a couple of minutes. With his current strength, it turned out to be very easy. Those who remained unharmed could not believe their eyes. It seemed as if a martial arts movie was being filmed somewhere nearby. At some point, one of the bikers realizes that resistance is futile and falls to his knees. He has realized his mistake and will never do that again. The hero believed that people who are not saints and sages may have many shortcomings, and if these people sincerely repented, then he forgives them. However, everything was not so simple. The guy, using his unique technique, increased the bacteria of one of the viruses he was familiar with. And after that, he stuck this yellow thing on the hand of the fleeing hooligan, while his accomplices were trying to figure out how they could also get out of here. The easiest way was also to fall on their knees and ask for forgiveness. Maybe then this master would have mercy on them. Hao Tian didn't even want to listen to them, but simply said that all these people could leave. But they were required to take several molecules of the virus with them. The bikers, of course, didn't suspect anything about the viruses and simply ran away from there with all their might. They considered themselves lucky today. The acting skills of these villains are too bad. Every emotion was literally written on their faces. A surprise is waiting for them soon. Hao Tian asked the guy why he didn't just call the police in the end, why he had to risk his life like that. So these bikers could have been detained and sent to prison, but the hero believes that there is no need to harbor grudges against other people. At some point, the girl agrees with him and asks him to state his name. Apparently, she really wanted to check whether Hao Tian was lying or not. The hero said that he had a first and last name given to him by the master. They sounded like Chen Pingdao. That is how one can address him. The company director suggested that his master was most likely mistaken, since everyone had previously called the hero Hao Tian. The guy continued to pretend that he didn't understand anything. After all, he came here to save her, and the beauty was trying to accuse him of lying. At this point, Hao Tian's nerves finally gave out, and she ordered the actor to stop his performance. Even a fool could tell he was pretending. The hero simply felt that the atmosphere was becoming too tense, so he was obliged to play out a drama about time travel. Really? Then why did Hao Tian just ask her for money? Was he also trying to relax her at once or something? Suddenly the girl started to look rather gloomy and picked up a wooden bat from the asphalt. This fool at least imagines how worried she had to be now. The guy asked her to slow down a bit. He still has to go to work early tomorrow, so he wants to leave right now. The company president, it turned out, was so angry that she was ready to tear the hero to shreds. This joker needs to return immediately. However, Hao Tian did not want to risk his own life and simply ran away to his home. In such a state, it was unsafe to talk to the beauty. The snow goddess was really worried about him. Why was this man always acting so unpredictably? What was wrong with him? The guy himself understood that this time he really shouldn't have gone so far. Apparently, his boss wasn't such a bad person. The hero immediately went to his home and began cultivating. After all, he hadn't trained for the last 2 days due to a bunch of stupid things to do. What he wanted most now was to see how far he could advance in a relatively short period of time. After some time, he realizes that he is very tired and wants to continue tomorrow. If the old man had seen such a picture at that moment, he would definitely have scolded him. After this, the events move forward a day. The company president was sitting in her office and reflecting on yesterday's situation. Chu Yaoyao noticed that something was wrong with her little sister and wanted to know the reason from her. Was someone bullying her again? Her eyes were very red. Most likely it was because of the fictitious marriage. All these years they had overcome any difficulties together, and this time they would definitely cope. Lin Yumu actually understands how difficult this situation is, since her future fiancé is very closely related to their family. By the way, the vice president has already selected several candidates to choose from, but they all seem a little unreliable because a beauty like her doesn't need trouble. It turned out that finding a suitable person is not so easy, but what does the younger sister think about their old friend Hao Tian? The girl couldn't believe that her elder sister actually wanted to pretend to be this fool's girlfriend. But in truth, they had very little time left. After all, Xiaolei had recently completed market research in the United States and was due back in just a few days. Chu Yaoyao still insisted on his own and did not want to do so. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. It was Mom. Lin Yumu learns from a woman that her future groom has just returned to the country and will come for dinner tomorrow evening. Events unfolded much faster. The mother also asks her daughter not to be too stubborn. She is no longer a child and should become more reasonable. Besides, her father's situation is getting worse than theirs. The company president informed her sister that Xiaolei had returned to the country a few days earlier and the situation had changed. Now they have no time left to discuss this, so the vice president must transfer the hero here immediately. After all, he has some good acting skills. If he manages to pretend at the meeting, as he did yesterday, then the girl will still have at least some hope left. Meanwhile, the guy was trying to do his work, but once again he was unable to rest properly, and because of this, he was constantly yawning. Suddenly, Chu Yaoyao approached him and asked him to go with her to the president's office. The sisters needed to talk to him about something. Hao Tian came into the office and asked with a smile on his face what had happened, and the vice president ordered him to act a little more seriously. First of all, Lin Yumu was interested in how long it had been since the cleaner knew what her position was in their company. As it turned out, the hero knew that the girl was the president of the company for quite a long time. But in fact, he meant that he found out about it only yesterday. But the boss didn't invite the hero because of such a trifle. She should start talking about really important things as soon as possible. The ice goddess called him here so that they could settle scores with him, because yesterday she transferred a huge amount of money to him. Hao Tian, in turn, did not think that he owed anyone anything. After all, it was the girl who hit him with her car, and what if he died? However, the company's president disagrees. Even according to the law, the amount for moral damages cannot amount to a whole million. No matter how hard the beauty tried, the guy still wouldn't return the money, because no one forced her to give him such a gift. Lin Yumu assures the worker that although he knows the law well, he will never be able to defeat such an influential woman as she is in court. The hero wasn't afraid of this at all. Was his boss really going to threaten him now? She should think twice before doing so. But in fact, the girl didn't intend to do this. The guy might not return her money. Instead, he needs to do something. Hao Tian was now curious. The ice goddess was indeed a very happy man. He agreed to help her. The company director explains the whole situation to him. Tomorrow, he needs to come to her house for dinner and play the role of her boyfriend. The beauty is confident that he will succeed because yesterday he managed to instantly get into the role of a time traveler. The hero was not opposed in principle, but with his background and appearance, none of the rich people would believe in such a scenario. But Lin Yumu didn't care whether other people believed it or not. He absolutely had to attend tomorrow's dinner. The company president also gives him her credit card. Now he needs to buy himself some decent clothes. She will pick him up at exactly 6 in the evening. Now that was a completely different conversation. If necessary, the guy could be an actor no worse than a movie star if they raised his salary for it. However, the sisters told him to stop talking and hurry to the store. The hero advises them not to worry. He knows a lot about fashion. After Hao Tian left, the girls discussed their choice for a long time, whether they had made the right decision today. The hero was able to find himself a great suit pretty quickly. Quite a long time had passed since he last had to wear formal clothes. Suddenly his phone rang. It turned out to be the same student whose mother he had helped with her treatment. She had an urgent call. The girl was standing on the threshold of the People's Hospital right now. If he had the opportunity, he should come here. The guy replies that he will be there as quickly as he can. Hao Tian caught the nearest taxi, and within a few minutes he was at the hospital, where his friend was already waiting for him. As it turned out, my mother's operation wasn't very successful, and the doctor said that she needed to prepare for radiation therapy or something similar. Therefore, the student has to ask him for a little more money. The guy doesn't mind, but due to bank restrictions, he won't be able to do everything at once. The only good thing was that this time only 50,000 was required, which was 4 times less than before, and the money had already been sent to her account. While the bank processes the transaction, the hero wants to see her mother. The girl sincerely thanked her friend, but her relative is now in a coma. Hao Tian says that everything is fine. He just wants to see her. Perhaps his ability will allow him to somehow help the woman. It was just that rare case where the guy acts like a good person, so he needs to stay that way until the very end. The woman suffered from a rather rare type of cancer, which had already developed very strongly and was in the very last stage. The hero warns his friend that if this is the terminal stage, then unfortunately no amount of money will fix this situation. The student understood this perfectly well, but the woman raised her alone, and because of this she had a very hard time. That is why, even though the girl does not know whether she will be able to save her mother, she will continue to fight with all her strength for her. And as long as she lives, her daughter will be happy for at least one more day in this world. Otherwise, she will have no family left at all. In fact, the guy understood perfectly well what his girlfriend was feeling now, because many years ago, he lost the only person close to him. Houghton noticed that the woman had the same surname as her daughter. Most likely the student was an illegitimate child. She has done a fantastic job of raising a child on her own, which is truly a huge achievement. The girl's name was Tintin. When the guy saw the sleeping bag, he realized that his girlfriend was sleeping right there because the neighboring bed was too expensive. After this, the guy suggested that she go to the doctor right away. Even though it was quite expensive, he didn't care. In the doctor's office, the hero came up with a story about being a distant relative of the patient, and now he wants to take on all the expenses himself. The doctor didn't see a problem with this, but asked Hao Tian to go out into the corridor and talk privately. This was very important. The guy asked his girlfriend not to worry. He would talk to the doctor a little and return to her. Everything would be fine. However, the doctor had bad news. Based on the test results, the situation was not very good. According to the most optimistic prognosis, the patient would not live more than a year. Even the most advanced methods of Western medicine did not offer any chance of a cure. After all, cancer in its final stages is very serious. The hero thanked the doctor and said that everything was clear to him and that he was ready to tell Tintin this news himself. However, before this, Hao Tian asked his friend to leave the room and close the doors tightly. The girl could not understand what he was going to do. And the hero insistently asked her not to worry about it. Now Tintin just had to trust him.